Hello, everyone. Omni Sensei here with What if Elijah Mikaelson had a hybrid son? Teen Wolf X The Originals. Part 2. If you enjoyed this kind of content, please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. Now, let's jump right into it. Sheriff Stalinsky stood over two bodies lying in the woods. He couldn't help but run his hand through his salt and pepper hair. This one right here's named Justin Mitchell. The kid over there is Cody Flynn. They're both missing their hearts. I'm guessing we'll find them around here somewhere. A deputy said, standing next to the sheriff. This whole thing was a mess for the Beacon Hills Police Department. Two kids suspected to be involved in the murder of three other kids are found dead. The only thing tying them to the murder was the camera. The only person that could answer their questions was the older guy standing in the doorway during the video. Looking at the bodies, Sheriff Stalinsky shook his head. This first one looks clean, like whoever did it was experienced. The second one though looks jagged. I'm guessing it was their first kill. So we're looking for two suspects. 3 if you include the guy we saw on the security camera. Notify me once forensics is done running their tests. Mikaelson Mansion. Elias shot up from his bed, breathing heavily as his eyes shined red. He disappeared, reappearing in the basement, a blood bag in his hand. Biting into it, 2 holes formed, allowing the blood to flow through. Elias drank until the bag was empty. Grabbing another bag, he tore into it as well. His breathing slowly returned to normal, for him at least, as his eyes returned to their pitch-black hue. The hunger was getting in worse. It wasn't as powerful as it was during the last full moon, but Elias could feel it building ever so slowly. Blood still had an effect in calming him, but he wasn't sure how long that would last. Looking at his phone, he knew he would have to go to school soon. Grabbing a metal cooler, he stuffed 10 or so blood bags in the cooler. After topping it off with ice, he sat the cooler by the door before running upstairs. He took a quick shower, throwing on a pair of blue Levi jeans. Elias grabbed a white tee before heading out the door. Styles' house. Styles shook from his stupor, turning to his dad. "Oh hey Dad, what's going on?" "Styles, you've been staring at your computer screen for the last 5 minutes. Is everything all right?" "Yeah, why wouldn't they be? I was just looking something up." "Maybe I would believe you if your computer screen was on. Tell me, Styles, are you sure everything is all right?" "Dad, I'm fine, really." "All right, well, get ready for school. I'm going to sleep. Caught a case last night." Styles nodded as he turned to the computer screen. Seeing his own reflection, he was searching for something. Anything to justify the lack of guilt he felt. He had taken a life, but he felt no remorse, not even the tiniest bit. He felt more content than anything. Buzz. Styles turned to his phone. It was a text from Scott. About a minute later, his room door opened, and Scott walked in with a serious expression. "What's so important that it couldn't wait until we go to school?" "It's Elias. I know both you and Derek believe that he's the one that bit us, but he's lying." Styles frowned, looking at Scott. He was trying to figure out if Scott was just being jealous. "Scott, what are you talking about?" "Styles, think about it. The one that bit us was larger than a bear. Have either you or Derek ever seen Elias become that thing?" Scott didn't even give Styles time to reply as he spoke again. "I know you don't believe me, but I can prove it." "How?" "I saw him last night, the one that bit us. Last night I woke on a school bus. The Alpha was standing outside. In front of me, there was blood everywhere. I don't know what happened next. When I woke up, I was at home." "Scott, it was probably a dream. We gotta get to school, or we'll be late." Styles grabbed his book bag, heading out his room door. Scoot was aware that it all could have been a dream, but he didn't tell Styles everything. School. Elias had just entered the school when the PA system started up. "Attention students, this is your principal. I know you're all wondering about the incident that occurred last night on one of our buses. But while the police work to determine what happened, classes will proceed as scheduled." Elias wasn't the only one to hear as Styles thought about his dad, who most likely was called in even though he desperately needed sleep. Looking at Scott, Styles immediately knew he had made a mistake earlier in dismissing his friend's story. "Remind me what happened again." "I was with Allison. We snuck on the bus. We were making out, and just when it was getting good, Allison was gone. The bus was full of blood, and by the time I made it to where the blood originated, I woke up." Scott whispered, looking around, hoping to catch a glimpse of Allison. I need some time to think. I'm going to class. Styles walked away, wondering if he should tell Elias or not. Mr. Harris's class, are you okay? Marin turned to Elias, asking with a frown. Yeah, why? I don't know, you just seem off. I'm fine, Elias whispered as he did his best to ignore the hunger. Lunch would be soon and the blood bags would calm him for the rest of the day. Hey, I think they found something. One of the students behind Elias said as everyone rushed to the window. Harris tried his best to get everyone settled down, but no one listened as they crowded the windows. They watched as the police pulled a man from the bus. Suddenly the guy jumped up and causing everyone to take a step back. He was covered in blood and deep scratches. Styles, I think I did that. Elias overheard Scott speaking and couldn't help but frown. After the bell rang, Elias quickly ran to his car. Sitting in the front seat, he chugged 3 bags of blood. Feeling his nerves calm, he closed his eyes in satisfaction as he finished the 3rd bag. Running back into the school, he found Styles and Scott whispering about the guy on the bus. My house after school. Both Scott and Styles nodded, not noticing Lydia, Marin, and Allison arriving beside them. What's happening at your house after school? Lydia asked with a smile. Styles's eyes lit up seeing her as he quickly replied. We're having a movie night tomorrow at Elias's house. If looks could kill, Styles would have been burned alive. He did his best to ignore Elias's glare that felt as hot as the sun. Is that true? Marin asked, causing Elias to drop the glare. Turning to her, a smile appeared on his face as he nodded. Then it settled. We're all watching movies at Elias's house tomorrow night. Allison and Scott weren't even given a chance to reply as the plan had already been solidified. Elias couldn't help but frown. One statement from Styles dragged him into a movie night. They didn't even have a TV at home. Later, all 4 guys were currently sitting in the basement as Scott retold the story of what happened last night, at least of what he remembered. It was the other alpha, Derek said, causing both Styles and Elias to agree. Scott frowned, seeing them agree so easily. He didn't understand. There was no proof that Elias was the one that bit them. I don't get, why are you guys so confident that Elias was the one that bit us? Scott, why would I deceive you? Before I came to this town, I lived with my family. I was happy where I was. When I bit both you and Styles, that all changed. I can't go back home without understanding what's happening to me. Even now you put yourself above the situation. The reason Derek believes it was me is that he can hear my heartbeat when I say it. I speak nothing but the truth. On the other hand, your heartbeat skipped a beat multiple times while you were telling your so-called story. The only thing I can believe is that you saw another alpha, most likely the one that sent those guys to attack you. Elias didn't mention Styles. He was the only one who knew how old he looked before the bite. Scott paused, looking at both Derek and Styles. He understood why Derek believed him, but he still wondered about Styles. Why was Scott there, though? Styles asked, breaking the silence. It's obvious, isn't it? Scott is the Omega of the pack. He's excluded himself from training and bonding. The Alpha wants to recruit him, and if that means what I think it does, he wanted Scott to kill that bus driver. At least I'm not a killer, Scott said as he stood heading up the stairs. Styles quickly followed him. Derek didn't remain around much longer as Elias was soon left alone. Grabbing a blood bag, he headed upstairs. Plopping down on the couch, he closed his eyes, relaxing. A couple of hours later. Elias, I'm going to meet your uncle Niklaus. I'll be back shortly. Why are you going to meet him? Can he not find his way here or something? Apparently the woman he is with has a flat tire. I'll be back soon. Elijah rushed out the door. Elijah stopped in his tracks as he heard gunshots going off in the distance. Following the sound, he stopped on a road. In front of him stood a woman with blonde hair holding a sniper rifle. Leaning against the car was Niklaus himself. He immediately noticed Elijah's arrival. What's going on here, Niklaus? Elijah stepped forward as the woman grunted and dropped her sniper rifle to the side. She hit a stray dog, Niklaus smirked. Another car pulled up, and Chris Argent quickly exited the vehicle, walking to his sister's side. He frowned seeing Elijah. We should go, Elias is waiting. Niklaus nodded, walking to Kate's car. He reached inside, pulling out a long box. Inside was a sword. Kate, I'll see you in the morning. Kate nodded with a smile as Chris looked confused. He had only ever seen his sister date 2 kinds of men. The first are those she's using to get information out of, and the second were those she was dating so that she could eventually kill them. Seeing Elijah, he immediately guessed that the man bidding Kate goodbye could only be a vampire. Argent stayed away from hunting vampires. When hunting werewolves they had a code, but vampires live off of human blood. That code would mean nothing and war would be inevitable. They knew how to pick their fights. Come now, I haven't seen my nephew in close to 2 years. Niklaus returned to Elijah's side. Before we go, I should warn you, Elias isn't the same little boy you saw 2 years ago. Becoming a Lycan changed him, and we're not sure if it's for the better considering he's still in his transitioning stage. Niklaus nodded and followed as Elijah disappeared into a gust of wind. They stopped in front of the mansion, and Niklaus couldn't help but marvel at its beauty. This place looks amazing, though it can't be compared to the one in New Orleans. I agree, this place will do as a replacement for now though. Elijah entered the front door, finding Elias sitting on the sofa. Uncle Klaus. Elias quickly stood up as he rushed to his uncle's side. Your father mentioned you had changed. I expected to see horns growing from the top of your head, but instead, you've grown into a handsome young lad. Niklaus pulled him in for a hug with a smile on his face, a genuine smile. Breaking the hug, Niklaus handed the box to Elias. Open it. Elias quickly opened the box, revealing an ancient sword, the hilt made of gold. The sword shined even in the darkness. Golden letters adorned the flat side of the blade. Elias immediately recognized them as Greek. Alexander the Great Sword. Elias looked up from the sword, hearing his uncle's voice. How'd you find it? I mean, hasn't it been over 2,000 years since Alexander last held this sword? I had a couple of witches track it down. Digging it up was a hassle, but that was almost 600 years ago. I've kept it hidden ever since, and now it's yours. I know you'll treasure it just as I have. Thank you, Uncle Klaus. Yes, Niklaus, you really outdid yourself this time. It's much better than the Porsche I got him, Elijah interjected, knowing how much Niklaus cherished the treasures he's collected over the many centuries. Well, I missed 2 birthdays. This will surely make up for that. Now moving on to more serious business. Why were you with Kate Argent? Elias was aware of Chris Argent being Allison's dad, but he had never heard of Kate Argent. She has some information I need, Niklaus spoke vaguely. Why not just compel the information out of her? Elias asked as he placed Alexander's sword back in its box. Where's the fun in that? What kind of information? Elijah interjected. The kind we've been searching for since we first found Elias. Elijah frowned hearing that, but he allowed Niklaus to continue. That night we failed to notice one thing: the person that killed Elias's mother wasn't a vampire or a werewolf, at least. Not the kind we're used to seeing. Elias, you took his life, you must have looked in his eyes at least once. What color were they? Elias closed his eyes, remembering that day blue. His eyes were cold blue. The color blue that the werewolves that frequent Beacon Hills have when they take an innocent life. Slowly the dots were connecting. Elijah frowned as he thought about it all. They had missed a vital clue in tracking down the ones that killed his son's mother. But Elias, becoming a Lycan, led them right back to it. Who better to give me information about these werewolves than the one that's hunted them her whole life? Klaus smiled as he looked at both Elijah and his nephew. Elias, you should head off to sleep. You have school in the morning. I'll show Niklaus his room. Sleep well. Elias nodded, making his way towards the stairs. Sleep well, dear nephew. Night, Uncle Klaus. Once he was sure Elias was upstairs, Elijah looked at his brother, a frown on his face. What aren't you telling me? Niklaus smiled, hearing his brother's question. Reaching in the cupboard, he pulled out a bottle of scotch. Pouring himself a glass, he brought the edge of the cup towards his face, sniffing with a look of content. 25-year-old Mikaelson. Taking a sip, Niklaus looked at his brother. His name is Marcus. He's something like a myth to werewolves. Getting information about him wasn't easy, but I've learned that he's a werewolf, but so much more advanced. Alphas bow before him as if he's their savior, and I get the feeling he was involved in the death of Elias's mother. He's like Elias, Elijah muttered. What are you talking about? He's a Lycan. The reason that the werewolves that frequent Beacon Hills are so different is because they were created by the Lycans. When bitten by an alpha Lycan, a human would become a werewolf, different from the ones that attacked our village. They don't become actual wolves when the full moon comes. According to Deaton, the last to do that was Talia Hale, and she's been dead for years. While I'm away, I'll be sure to search for more information. If this Marcus is real, it means he's an enemy. After showing Niklaus his room, Elijah exited the house. Standing on the porch, he turned to his brother. Take care of Elias. Niklaus nodded as Elijah disappeared, leaving Niklaus alone on the porch. The next day, Elias woke to the sound of his own heartbeat. He didn't need a mirror to realize his eyes were glowing red. He vanished, reappearing in the basement, a blood bag in his hand. This was becoming his daily routine. The full moon was close, he could feel it. His hunger would only grow. The next full moon would initiate the second stage of his Lycan transition. He wasn't sure if the next stage would be worse, but honestly, anything would be better than his current situation. Entering his room, he quickly took a shower and brushed his teeth, getting rid of the smell of blood on his breath. Exiting the shower, he grabbed a shoebox, pulling out a pair of Flu Game 12s. Throwing on a pair of black jeans and a red Jordan hoodie, he looked in the mirror, smiling. Before leaving, he restocked his blood bag supply. He pulled off listening to music. The drive to school was short. He entered his first period class, taking his seat next to Styles. "Dude, you ready for tonight?" Styles asked with a smile. "Tonight?" Elias frowned. "Yeah, we're having a movie night at your house." Elias frowned, finally remembering. "I totally forgot. With my uncle just arriving and the full moon being in a couple of days, I don't think it's a good idea." "It's too late to go back, man. You shouldn't have brought it up yesterday." Styles shook his head, looking at Elias. "You're the one who brought it up yesterday." Styles frowned, hearing that as confusion filled his mind. "You sure it was me? If I remember correctly, you were the one who said to meet you at your house. This is your fault. If you want to have a movie night, do it at your house." "Dude, my house is a dump compared to the palace you live in. How about I bring the TV?" Elias sighed, knowing there was no reason to continue this conversation. They had already made the plans anyway. "Fine." Styles raised his fist in the air, celebrating his victory, causing Elias to sigh. Elsewhere, Derek Hale walked the hallways of Beacon Hills High, searching for Scott or Styles. His vision was already beginning to blur. He stopped in front of Jackson's locker. "Tell me where to find Scott or Styles." Jackson looked from his locker to Derek, and he seemed to realize something. "You're looking for those two wimps. I'll tell you as long as you tell me whatever it is you're selling them." "Do you even know where they are?" Derek focused his hearing, zoning in on Jackson's heartbeat. "Tell me what you're selling them, and I will take you straight to them." Derek frowned, walking past Jackson. "Wait, we're not done here." Jackson latched on to Derek's shoulder. Derek reacted on pure instinct. Turning around, he grabbed Jackson by the back of the neck, allowing his nails to ease into his neck. "Touch me again, and they won't find your body." Derek's nails eased into the back of Jackson's neck. Pausing, Derek looked like his hand, realizing he was losing control of his werewolf side. Releasing his Jackson, he turned around, heading down the hallway. Jackson leaned against the school locker, looking at Derek like he was a maniac. Reaching to the back of the neck, he hissed in pain. Looking at his hand, he noticed the blood. Derek continued making his way down the halls, peeking his head into the window of each classroom door, doing his best to find Scott or Styles. Looking in, he found Styles messing around with his pencil, completely ignoring the teacher. Standing to the side, he waited. Once the school bell rang, he waited for Styles to exit the classroom before following him. Styles squeaked as Derek pulled him into an empty janitor closet. "Derek, what the freak is wrong with you?" Styles's heart was beating fast. He looked ready to attack. "I've been shot. Call Elias and Scott." Looking at Derek, Styles immediately noticed his sickly complexion and the smell of blood that lingered on his body. Pulling out his phone, he immediately sent Elias and Scott a text. "Come on, we're going to the boys' locker room. We don't have practice today, so it should be empty." Styles opened the door, leading Derek to the locker room. Entering, they found Scott already in the locker room waiting. Elias entered shortly after. "Why aren't you healing?" Scott said as he noticed the blood dripping from Derek's hand. "Wolfsbane. The bullet I was shot with was laced with wolfsbane." Derek leaned against the locker, short of breath. It was getting worse. "I need one of the bullets she shot me with." "Who shot you?" Elias asked, eyeing Derek. Kate Argent." Scott paused, hearing that as everyone turned to look at him. "Did Allison mention anything about a family member coming to visit?" Scott nodded, seeing no reason to lie. "She said her aunt came to visit from out of town." Wait, can't your blood heal him? Styles asked. I can heal him, but it won't get rid of the wolfsbane. He'll eventually die from wolfsbane poisoning. We need one of those bullets. I'm going to Allison's right after school. If the bullets are there, I'll find one. Elias nodded to Scott before turning back to Derek. Biting into his arm, he offered it to Derek. Derek grabbed onto his arm, taking in the vampire blood, allowing his complexion to return to normal. Scott will meet you at my house call if anything goes wrong. Scott nodded, leaving the locker room. Elias turned to Styles. Let's get him to my house. While Derek looked like he was better, the truth was his blood could only heal him so much. It wouldn't take long for the wolfsbane to spread throughout the rest of his body. Once it reached his heart, he would die. Scott immediately headed to Allison's, knocking on the door. He was glad when the one to answer was Allison. Scott, come in. Scott walked in with a smile on his face. We're alone. Yeah, my parents won't be back for a couple of hours. What about your aunt? Didn't she just arrive last night? Allison opened her room door, letting Scott enter before closing and locking the door behind her. My aunt won't be back till late tonight. I think she had a boyfriend or something. Scott nodded quickly, telling Allison he needed to make a call. Exiting her room, he walked towards the room right next to hers. It was the guest room where he believed Kate would be staying. He quickly searched the room. Not finding anything, he quickly walked out, entering the restroom. Pulling out his phone, he called Styles. Styles, she's not here, and neither are the bullets. Allison said she won't be back till late tonight. Styles frowned, hearing that, turning to Elias. How long do you think we have? A couple of hours at most. Elias frowned, looking at Derek. When he heard the sound of a door closing, he focused his hearing, realizing his uncle had come back, and he brought a guest. I'll be right back, Styles. Elias made his way upstairs, finding Mikaelson making a cup of scotch while a woman with blonde hair watched from the side. Elias, come, let me introduce you. This is a friend of mine, Kate Argent. It's nice to meet you, Kate. Elias smiled. It's nice to meet you as well. You go to Beacon Hills High, right? Kate asked with a smile on her face. Seeing Elias nod, her eyes brightened. I don't know if you've met her, but my niece Allison goes there. Allison is actually a friend of mine. You look far too young to be her aunt. Kate laughed, hearing that, and Elias excused himself, quickly running back downstairs. Styles, I found her. What, how? She's upstairs. The only problem is she's with my uncle. I can find out where the bullet, but I'll need you to distract my uncle while I compel her to tell me where the bullets are. Styles froze, hearing that Elias had already brought him up to date on Mikaelson. That was one person he wished to stay away from. How am I supposed to distract a 1,000-year-old vampire? What if he's listening right now? Styles asked with a frown on his face. He was starting to panic. He's not listening. How do you know? Because he's planning something. He doesn't have time to focus on us. His attention is on Kate. I need 30 seconds at the most. You can distract him for at least 30 seconds. Styles thought about it for a second, and he didn't really have a choice. Derek was dying right before their eyes. Fine. Upstairs, Mikaelson was currently talking to Kate about her family. He already knew of her brother. He was more interested in her father. From what he could tell, Kate practically followed his every order. I forgot my phone in the car. I'll be right back. Kate smiled as she grabbed her car keys, exiting the house. Mikaelson turned to see his nephew and another teenage boy enter the room. Uncle Klaus, this is my friend Styles. Styles looked at Mikaelson as his heartbeat got faster. He was nervous. Mikaelson was the most dangerous person he had met in his entire life. As Styles just stared at Mikaelson, Elias turned to the kitchen, exiting through the back door. He disappeared, appearing behind the unsuspecting Kate. Kate turned around and jumped in surprise. Elias, you scared me. Elias looked into her eyes and began to talk as her pupils dilated. Where are the wolfsbane bullets you used when you shot Derek Hale? In the house. So how did you and Elias become friends? Mikaelson asked as he sipped his scotch. He bit me, Styles stated dryly. He bit you? Yeah, he bit me, turning me into a werewolf. You don't hate him for that? He changed your entire life? Mikaelson searched Styles's face for even a bit of resentment, finding none. Nah, it was for the best. I didn't really fit in before I became a werewolf. I had one friend, now I have at least 5. Styles smiled, thinking about how his life had changed in the last couple of weeks. Niklaus nodded, seeing no reason to kill Styles. He took another sip of his scotch, beginning to worry what was taking Kate so long. How many people have you killed? Niklaus turned his head to Styles, surprised to hear such a question. Some say close to 1 million, though the highest I've counted is 200,000. After that, keeping count seemed redundant. Well, you're no Hitler. Hitler caused the death of nearly 11 million people, yet his own hands remained clean. He was a monster among monsters. I would have killed him myself if I didn't have my own monsters to worry about. Styles nodded before he finally thought about the thing that had been disturbing him since he had first killed. I killed someone recently. I expected to feel something, guilt, remorse, but all I could feel was relief. And now you're wondering if you've become a monster, Styles nodded, causing Niklaus to smirk. For what reason did you kill this unlucky fellow? He threatened to do things to someone I hold dear. Then I see no problem in him dying. When someone threatens family and loved ones, you end their very existence. Elias entered at that moment, holding a couple of sodas in his hand. Styles breathed a sigh of relief, not only because it worked, but because he could finally stop wondering. I got it, Elias said once they finally made it downstairs. They were in her trunk. She won't even remember the conversation, so we have no need to worry. Give it to me, Derek said as his eyes glowed blue. Grabbing the bullet, he broke it in half with his teeth. Pouring the wolfsbane-laced gunpowder on a table, he pulled out a lighter, setting it aflame. They watched as the gunpowder turned into blue smoke before Derek pulled the leftover powder into his hand, digging into his wound. His wound began to blow blue, and Derek fell to the ground in pain. He shook before the wound finally healed, disappearing completely. That was awesome, Styles said, causing Elias to agree and Derek to stare at them like idiots. Go ahead and tell Scott Derek's fine, though I think that's the last thing on his mind right now. Why do you think that? Styles raised an eyebrow, pulling out his phone. Because I don't think there's much studying going on at Allison's house. Styles thought about it for a second before a smile grew on his face. Scott's finally becoming a man. That just leaves you and me, Elias. Yeah, but in case you forgot, I actually have a girlfriend, Styles. You and Lydia are barely friends. Elias laughed. Later that day, Elias laid on the couch looking into the eyes of Marin. His hand played with her hair. We should talk. Or we could do something else, Elias said as he kissed Marin on the neck. Marin was cut off as Elias kissed her neck again before his hands began to roam her body. Allowing herself to be lost in his embrace, Marin paused as she could feel Elias's member poking her in the abdomen. Elias felt her pause, but he ignored it as he began to kiss her lips, bringing her back to reality. No longer hesitating, Marin climbed atop of Elias. Now straddling his waist, she lowered herself, meeting his lips with her own. Elias smiled as he gripped her waist. He knew where things were headed, though his smile turned to a frown when he heard a knock on the front door. You should get that, Marin said as she kissed his neck this time. No, they'll go away eventually. Elias hoped as he returned his attention to Marin, but the knocking continued. He only knew one person who could be so annoying at a time like this. Focusing his hearing, he could hear Scott. Styles, maybe we should just leave. Scott held a huge flat-screen TV in his hands, peeking around it to speak to Styles. And disappoint Lydia? I think not. Elias will open the door eventually. Styles continued to knock. Elias sighed before giving Marin one last kiss. He stood up, fixing his joggers before heading to the door. Styles, what are you doing here? Elias opened the door, surprised to see Scott holding a TV. Movie night, and since you guys don't have a TV, we brought one. Open the door. How about we have the movie night tomorrow? Marin and I were in the middle of something, Elias said with a frown on his face. He was hoping to persuade Styles. Marin's already here? Good, Lydia, Allison. Come on, Marin's already here. Elias's frown deepened, and he was regretting ever becoming friends with Styles in the first place. Scott sat to the side with a relatable frown on his face. He was used to Styles and had been since they were really young. Lydia and Allison exited Allison's mom's car and made it towards the front door. Elias, you live here? Lydia asked. Yeah, why? My mom tried to buy it a couple of years back. Some rich family had owned it since like the 50s. I didn't realize you were part of that family. Lydia smiled, walking inside. Allison said hi before following her. They were soon sitting on the couch talking to Marin with smiles on their faces. Elias frowned, wondering about Lydia's family. He himself wasn't aware of how old Lydia's family was. Shaking himself from his thoughts, he found Scott setting up the TV, while Styles stood next to him with 3 DVD cases in his hand. "So time to vote. What movie are we watching? I have The Notebook." Styles held up Lydia's favorite movie, causing her eyes to brighten. "Next I have Friends with Benefits. I mean, who doesn't love Mila Kunis, not to mention Justin Timberlake?" Styles sat that DVD to the side. "Okay, the final one is Twilight. I don't think anyone here has seen it, but it's supposed to be about this weird chick falling in love with a vampire." While Lydia loved The Notebook, she was honestly more interested in seeing Twilight. Allison and Marin agreed, leaving the boys with no choice but to nod in agreement. "Styles, let's get the other love seat from the basement." Styles nodded, thinking it was a good idea, while Marin went to go pop some popcorn. Minutes later, a sofa and 2 love seats were in the room surrounding the TV. Marin and Elias immediately took the sofa, grabbing a cover. They cuddled under the sheets. Contrary to everyone's expectations, Lydia and Allison stuck to one love seat, leaving both Scott and Styles sitting next to each other. Styles sent Elias a couple of dirty glances, and Elias just laughed, taking this as payback for interrupting him earlier. The movie began, and they quickly realized that the movie was doing a pretty good job with Edward and his family being eerily close to real vampires, until Edward stepped into the light and started glittering like a little girl's Barbie doll. Styles couldn't help but laugh, thinking of Elias stepping into the sunlight and looking like he got hit by a glitter bomb. Though things got awkward when Mikaelson walked into the door with Kate by his side, and Elias suddenly remembered what his father had told him. "Having a party without me?" Mikaelson smirked as he walked into the kitchen. Elias quickly. Allison was surprised to see her aunt arrive. "You said you wouldn't be back until later tonight. It's only 7 o'clock, Elias said, looking at his phone. "Look, Kate, he's trying to kick me out already. Afraid I'll embarrass you, dear nephew?" Mikaelson took a sip from the cup of scotch he had just made. "No," Elias quickly denied before he could reply. Allison entered the kitchen. "Aunt Kate, what are you doing here?" Kate smiled before grabbing Allison by the arm, exiting the room. Elias looked as they left before he returned his attention back to his smirking uncle. "Listen to me, Elias." Mikaelson stepped forward, putting a hand on Elias's shoulder. "Next time you need information, come to me first. No need to go behind my back. For you, I would slay monsters of innumerable quantity." Elias nodded, surprised that Mikaelson even knew about it. "How did you find out?" "I'm over 1,000 years old. You think I can't tell when someone is trying to distract me?" Mikaelson smiled, looking at his nephew. "That's fine though, because while your father is gone you'll be learning from me. I'll bring you up to par. You'll soon understand what it means to be a Mikaelson." Elias nodded quite excitedly. He had heard countless tales by both his father and his uncle. He knew what the Mikaelsons were capable of, even if that meant they had to sacrifice so much just to survive. With Allison and Kate, they were both currently at the top of the stairs, and Allison was surprised seeing her aunt so happy. "Wait, so you're dating Elias's uncle?" Her eyes brightened. "Yes, he's so charismatic. I find myself saying yes to him without even knowing why. I think I'm in love." Kate spoke with stars in her eyes. Allison didn't know what to say. Her and Scott's relationship was constantly building. She wasn't sure when she would be able to say she was in love, but she liked him a lot. "So tell me about Scott. Are he and Elias close?" Kate asked with a raised eyebrow. "No, Scott is closer with Styles, but Styles seems closer with Elias. I don't know, but there's usually another guy around. His name is Derek. He's pretty nice. He dropped me off at home when Scott got sick a couple of weeks ago." "Wait, Derek. Tall, dark, and handsome. Looks like he's always sulking." Kate was surprised. This would mean they were friends with a known werewolf. Chances are one of them was a werewolf. Her brother hadn't told her about a new beta popping up, which means Derek was probably keeping it on a down low, though she was sure he would probably be dead soon. Wolfsbane-laced bullets were hell even for alphas. She doubted Derek could survive without her help. It was late at night, and Sheriff Noah Stinlinski stood in front of a convenience store. The glass windows had been shattered, and the inside of the store was in rambles. The cashier had been found with half of his neck missing. They suspected animal attack, but with no other witnesses, they couldn't be sure. "Here you go, Sheriff. Things just keep getting weirder in this town," a deputy said, handing Noah a CD. "Tell me about it," Noah said as he entered his car. Inserting the CD into the computer, he waited for it to load up before skipping ahead. He stopped just before 8 p.m. Resuming the video, he watched as an animal charged into the store on all fours. The store was then torn to shambles as the animal moved through the aisles, closing in on the cashier. The camera angle changed, zoning in on the cashier frozen in place as this huge monster approached. Noah felt himself shiver, finally getting a good look at the animal. It was huge, resembling a wolf, and its eyes shined a bloody red. It made quick work of the cashier biting into his neck before he could even react. The monster jumped through the window, disappearing into the darkness. But before he disappeared, Sheriff Stalinsky could see its shadow change from that of a monster to that of a man. Closing his laptop, he looked around, making sure no one else had seen what he himself had just witnessed. He needed to talk to someone who might have seen something like this before. Mikaelson Mansion. Elias laid in bed, tossing and turning as moonlight cascaded through his window. Even in his sleep, he could feel his hunger growing. Inside his head, a nightmare was playing out. He was surrounded by his friends, laughing and having a good time when he looked at Styles telling a silly joke. The sky turned dark, and he was alone standing in front of Styles. Blood dripped from Styles's mouth as his eyes looked lifeless. His right arm was missing. Elias could hear him repeating the same thing over and over again. "Why, Elias, why?" Elias looked down at his hand. Seeing the missing arm of Styles, he dropped it, taking a step back. The arm looked mangled, as if someone had taken bites of it. Bring his other hand up to his mouth, he noticed the blood on his face. Frowning, he looked back at Styles, but he wasn't alone this time. Next to him stood Derek, then Allison, Scott, and Lydia. Finally, Marin appeared, canine marks on her neck. Her heart was missing, and Elias immediately noticed it appear in his hand. To the side, he could see his uncle Klaus watching it all unfold with a smirk on his face. "Elias, Elias, wake up, Elias." Elias was pulled from his nightmare as his canines extended and his eyes shined red. Niklaus did his best to hold him down before finally releasing one of his arms, biting into his own before bringing to Elias's mouth. It took a while for Elias to finally calm down, and Niklaus couldn't help but feel a bit of sympathy for his nephew. A couple of years ago, his life was so peaceful, free from the pain and terror this world held. The full moon is tomorrow, and from what I hear, that hunger you feel will only grow worse. No school for you today. Rest well, dear nephew. I'll bring up a batch of blood bags, that way you can calm yourself while I'm away. Elias didn't reply, only breathing in and out heavily. Sleep wasn't something he was currently interested in. Niklaus sighed before exiting the room. Preparation was needed if Elias expected to survive the future. Just considering the number of enemies, it would be tough. But this Marcus was someone they all needed to be worried about. He was a ghost even to them who knew how long he had been hidden. Setting a cooler full of blood bags next to Elias's bed, he soon disappeared, running through the woods. He searched, finally picking up a trail. Tracking down the Alpha would be difficult if you weren't extremely experienced. Tracking the Alpha's scent was the easy part, but you would have to know that a werewolf in his werewolf form smelled completely different from he would in his human form. The scent trail soon ended. Most wouldn't be able to pick up the human scent, but Niklaus immediately recognized it. The smell of alcohol, armpits, and body odor made his nose wrinkle. Following the scent, he ended up in front of Beacon Hills Memorial Hospital. Walking inside, he turned down a hallway, eventually ending up in the long-term care facility. Compelling the nurse sitting at the desk, he quickly entered the room where the scent was concentrated most. Inside the room, he found a man sitting in a wheelchair, his back facing the door. He couldn't help but smile, seeing his plan had worked. "Not out terrorizing the neighborhood today," Niklaus smirked, walking to the other side of the room. "You have a little something on your face." Niklaus pointed, looking at the unresponsive Peter Hale. "I mean, you must know who I am, and that means either you reply or I'll simply kill you now." Niklaus focused his vision of Peter, waiting for him to reply, and just when his patience was reaching its limit, he noticed Peter's pointer finger twitch. Going to such lengths just to remain anonymous, Niklaus frowned before grabbing a syringe. Reaching for a foam cup, he bit into his wrist, allowing blood to fill the cup. Using the syringe, he filled it up with blood before bringing it to Peter's shoulder. Stabbing the syringe into his skin, he injected him with his blood. He watched as his face visibly healed before the drug he used to stay paralyzed wore off, and a frown appeared on his face. Now why would the great Niklaus Mikaelson come to visit little old me? If you wanted me dead, I would be, which means you need me for something. I wonder what it is. Peter smiled evilly. Don't be mistaken, I don't need you. I could do all this without you. But with your assistance, things will be a little less troubling. You're doing all this killing, hiding, and terrorizing for revenge. But you're misplacing your efforts. Sure, Kate Argent pulled the trigger, but she wasn't the one who ordered the death of you and your family. Peter frowned hearing that you're here to protect Kate Argent. I couldn't care less about Kate Argent, but I need her alive. Figure out a way to make her pay without killing her. Meanwhile, start making plans to kill the mastermind behind all of this, her father Gerard. Peter thought about a bit before nodding. And what about your nephew and his meddling friends? Hit them with all you got, Niklaus smirked. Don't blame me if he dies. If you have what it takes to kill my nephew, it means he doesn't deserve the Mikaelson name, Niklaus said, walking away, leaving Peter to his own thoughts. He was already aware of Kate's deception. He found it to be interesting. A human planning to take down an original, he found it laughable. If Peter understood what he was implying, Kate would soon go from hunter to hunted, and when that happened, he would have a guinea pig. He felt he was one step closer to breaking the curse. Thursday, one day before the full moon, Sheriff Noah Stalinsky entered Deaton's veterinarian shop with his laptop in hand. He patiently waited as Deaton dealt with the customer. What can I do for you, Sheriff? Deaton smiled, though deep down he felt pity for Sheriff Stalinsky. He was the sheriff in a city where crimes impossible to solve without the right information happened every day. You went to school to be a vet. I'm sure you have the knowledge to identify animals that aren't only domestic but wild, correct? Deaton raised an eyebrow hearing the question. Sheriff Stalinsky acted fast, opening his laptop. He pulled up the video of the convenience store. Pressing play, he watched Deaton's reaction to the video. Deaton watched as everything unfolded, and he was more surprised that the video had been caught on cam. Not showing anything on his face, he turned to Sheriff Stalinsky with confidence. Looks like a mountain lion to me. Noah frowned hearing that as he rewinded the video before pressing play again. This time he zoomed in on the animal's shadow. Deaton could only curse internally as he watched the shadow go from an animal on all four to that of a human. Sometimes mountain lions stand on 2 feet. Maybe that shadow was jumping towards something. I'm sorry I can't be of much help, Sheriff. Deaton spoke with faux remorse in his voice. So you think it was a mountain lion? Once again, I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help. I have a sick basket hound in the back. You're sure it was a mountain lion? Noah asked again. I'm sorry, Sheriff, maybe you should talk to the Argents. They're a family known for hunting. I have a sick dash. A sick basket hound, I know. Well, thanks for the help. Noah closed his laptop. Before exiting the place, he could tell Deaton was hiding something. He was getting close. Something inside of him wouldn't allow him to stop his search. Sheriff Stalinsky wasn't the only one getting close to a secret. Jackson was currently standing at his locker, a lacrosse glove in his hand. Scott had dropped this after their first lacrosse game, and he had spent weeks trying to find out why there were holes in the tips. The holes wouldn't help him in the game, so why would he purposely poke holes in his glove? That was until he had a run-in with Derek Hale. The marks on his neck were similar to the holes on the gloves. He was beginning to believe that it wasn't drugs that helped Scott and Styles become better at lacrosse. Although Elias didn't come to school today, he wouldn't end up missing much due to parent-teacher conferences. He spent most of his time in agonizing pain. His hunger had far surpassed the level it had reached during the last full moon. Sitting in the basement, he clenched his fist as hard as he could, drawing blood as his nails pierced his palm. He had already drained the blood bags his uncle left for him empty. He was doing his best not to dig into another bag. He had a feeling that if he did, his hunger would overwhelm him, pushing him to search for something a little more satisfying. He shook from his thoughts as he heard the door open. The sound of footsteps flooded his ears. He could tell it was only one person. I've just experienced the most boring day of my life. What would the masses think if they knew the great Niklaus Mikaelson was forced to attend a parent-teacher conference? Niklaus frowned as he focused on his nephew, who looked ready to pounce. You might want to reconsider that, Niklaus said, causing Elias to pause. Before Elias could react, Niklaus had already appeared in front of him, sending a kick to his temple, sending him flying into a wall. Waking towards his nephew, he kneeled down, latching onto his shoulder. Don't hesitate in front of your enemy, it'll lead you to your death. When attacking, remember, you should not only know your enemy, you should also know yourself. And finally, once you decide to attack, hold nothing back, go for the kill, or next time you'll be the one dead. Elias said nothing as his eyes began to glow red. His nails extended as he gripped Niklaus's wrist. I understand. Elias growled as he returned a kick to Niklaus' gut, sending him sliding backward. Hold nothing back, Elias said as his features began to change again. This time pitch black hair began to grow on his body. Niklaus reacted, quickly appearing behind his nephew. He grabbed his head before twisting, causing the change to halt as Elias fell to the ground. While I would have loved to see you in your Lycan form, this isn't exactly the most fitting location. I'll let you rest. When you awake we'll talk, Niklaus said as he turned around to head upstairs. Without Niklaus realizing, Elias's eyes shot open to crimson red as he appeared directly behind Niklaus, reaching his hand through his chest, grabbing his still beating heart. Niklaus froze in his spot as his eyes widened. That's never happened before. He coughed up blood as he realized it was his nephew holding his heart. What are you waiting for? Do it, Niklaus chuckled as he got no reply from Elias. Elias's eyes slowly dimmed as he realized he was holding the heart of his only biological family besides his father. Relaxing his grip on Niklaus's heart, taking a step back, he watched as Niklaus fell to his knees. Walking towards the metal coolers full of blood bags, he quickly handed one to his uncle before grabbing one himself. How are you feeling? Niklaus asked as he finished his first blood bag, heading for another. I'm fine, Niklaus frowned hearing that. Not feeling like ripping my throat out. Maybe removing one of my limbs or ripping my heart out. I'm getting there, Elias said as his uncle did his best to unnerve him. I had your heart in my hand. I could have crushed it or removed it with just the slightest bit of strength. But at that moment it wasn't something I wanted to do. The first time I turned into a Lycan, I lost control of myself. I hated that feeling. It's something I never want to feel again. But I get the feeling tomorrow night I won't have a choice. The Lycan part of me wants to take control. I'm not sure if I'm strong enough to stop it. Then don't embrace it. If you spend the rest of your life fighting who you are, you'll never become the person you're meant to be. Look at us vampires. Most choose to embrace their new life, and they find it to be even more amazing each day. While others fight it, choosing to live off animal blood. That only makes them weak. Oh, and even if you had tried your hardest, you wouldn't have destroyed my heart. I'm glad you didn't try at least. Why? Because it means I'm not doing a terrible job at this being an uncle thing. Niklaus smirked as he turned to head upstairs, leaving his nephew to his own thoughts. The day of the full moon. Elias woke up feeling quite normal for once, no overwhelming hunger influencing his thoughts. Walking towards the restroom, he was a little skeptical. He expected the next stage to be even worse than the first. Grabbing his toothbrush, he reached for the toothpaste, squeezing out just enough to cover the bristles. Looking up, he was greeted by himself in the mirror. Only his eyes were glowing red. Opening his mouth, he noticed his teeth hadn't changed. Deciding to ignore it for now, he quickly brushed his teeth, making sure to do the suggested 2 minutes. Descending the stairs, he frowned, not finding his uncle Niklaus. Focusing his hearing, he quickly noticed the sound of the door opening. Niklaus entered carrying a bag. Why are your eyes glowing red? He closed the door behind him, placing the bag down on a table, waiting on his nephew's reply. I don't know, it's like I'm not in control. Niklaus frowned hearing that, and Elias was practically having the same thoughts. If his eyes were red now, what was next? Would his canines elongate? When would it stop? Would he eventually be forced to shift into his Lycan form? Later, Kate Argent stood in front of her brother with a serious look on her face. You think I'm planning something? Chris Argent nodded. You show up randomly, and you're all of a sudden acquainted with Niklaus Mikaelson. Kate made to defend herself when Chris interrupted. Don't give me one of your patented lies. You don't think I can tell when you're playing at something? The last time you were this infatuated with a person, his house burned to the ground. You think I played a part in that? Kate's brows furrowed. I don't know what to think. Chris brought his hand up to his forehead. Looking at his sister, he couldn't help but wonder. But it doesn't matter. Now you're messing with an original, and my guess is you aren't working alone. Who put you up to this? Was it Gerard? I don't know what you're talking about. I just came to visit my family. Gerard and I both know not to mess with vampires, especially the originals. Chris squinted his eyes, looking at his sister, not knowing whether to believe her or not. Seeing the question stop, Kate quickly made her way upstairs straight to Allison's room. Entering, she found Allison lying in bed talking on the phone. Yeah, Lydia, I'll call you back. Allison smiled, seeing her aunt. I know it's late, but happy birthday. Kate pulled out a silver necklace with a wolf and arrows on it. Holding the necklace, Allison couldn't help but take a closer look at it. I love it. Her eyes widened as she traced her finger over the wolf. It's a family heirloom, and I know you're eventually going to want to know about your family heritage. So you're gonna make me work for it. Allison looked up from the pendant. Some things are worth the effort. Kate leaned forward, helping Allison put the necklace on. Happy birthday. Kate pulled Allison into a hug, smiling. Go ahead and show your parents. Allison nodded as she ran down the stairs. Kate looked to Allison's bed where her phone was quickly opening it. Searching, she easily found Scott's name. Sending him a text, she waited for him to reply before quickly deleting the messages. Scott's lips curved upward. Standing next to him was Styles with a bunch of chains. Change of plans. I'm going to meet with Allison. Styles rolled his eyes, looking at his friend. Dude, tonight's a full moon, you're not going anywhere. Styles, ever since you explained to me how you stay in control, I haven't felt the urge to maim or kill. Even now I feel in complete control. Allison is my anchor, just like your dad is yours. Would you ever hurt your dad? I'm going with, even if you feel like you're in complete control, anything can happen. So where are you guys meeting at? The school. I'll drive. Styles dangled his keys in the air. Beacon Hill High. Kate Argent stood in front of the school. She wore black jeans and a jacket. Her blonde hair falls down her back. Walking inside, she pulled a chair from a classroom, placing it in the middle of the hallway. Now she just needed to wait. It didn't take long for Scott and Styles to reach the school. With the sun currently going down, they were forced to fight for control, even if that fight was a little easier to fight now. Parking the car, Styles looked to his friend. I'm not being a third wheel, you'll have to go in without me. Scott chuckled, opening the car door. He looked back at Styles. Thanks, Styles. Styles nodded, pulling out his phone. He opened the bubble pop game. Scott opened the school door. His eyes lit up, seeing the shadow of a person sitting in the hallway. Closing the door behind him, he walked closer, though he quickly realized it wasn't Allison sitting in the chair. You're Allison's aunt, right? Oh, you must be Scott. Allison will be right back. She just ran to the ladies' room. Kate's eyes narrowed, looking at Scott. She couldn't tell if he was the beta or not, but she was about to find out. Outside, Styles paused, looking around. He could feel someone was watching him. He wasn't sure who it was until he saw a huge shadow rush into the school. Closing the game, he quickly texted Elias, "Need help now, at school, hurry." Inside, Kate slowly reached to pull out her taser when they both heard a sound. The school doors, which Scott had closed, were now wide open. The black shadow of Peter Hale blurred past Scott, crashing into the frozen Kate. Kate was sent flying into the lockers. Peter growled as he looked at her. Scott, we have to leave. Styles appeared at the doors, screaming for Scott to run. Allison. I have to find Allison. Scott dashed past Peter and Kate, using his hearing to listen for a heartbeat. Styles's facial expression changed multiple times. I wish I had smarter friends. Dashing after Scott, he followed him as he ran down the school hallways, searching for Allison. Peter Hale stood over a stricken Kate as his body began to contract. His animalistic-like traits began to diminish. As the hair on his body began to retract, he slowly became human. His lack of clothing did little to dismay him. What do you want from me? Kate yelled, seeing the alpha reform back into a human. My name is Peter. Kate just raised an eyebrow. Peter Hale. Kate's eyes widened, hearing that last part. I wanted you to see my face. I wanted you to know that the Hale fire wasn't a crime you could just walk away from, and since I can't kill you, I'll give you a fate worse than death. Peter's eyes glowed red as he slowly took steps towards Kate. I'll turn you into the thing you hate most. The thing you've hunted since you were 16. I wonder how your family will react knowing you've become one of the beasts they love to hunt. Peter grabbed Kate's wrist, biting into her wrist as his canines elongated. Looking at his handiwork, he couldn't help but smile. I hope you survive the bite, Kate. Now I have other business to attend to. Peter left her as he walked down the hallway, searching for Scott and Styles. Should I kill them or force them to join my pack? Peter asked himself as a grin appeared on his face. Kate sat there looking at the bite. She had heard the stories about hunters being bitten. There was a code one that every hunter should abide by. If a hunter gets bitten, it was their duty to take their own lives, or they would be hunted like a beast, forever remembered as one. Elsewhere, Elias groaned as he laid on his bed. Reaching his hand down to the floor, he gripped his phone as his nails had become longer and sharper. His worries from earlier came true. He couldn't turn them off. His eyes continued to glow as his teeth and nails changed next. He was currently fighting the instinct to become a Lycan. He wasn't sure what he would do once that happened. Unlocking his phone, he swiped down the cursor, looking at the message from Styles as a frown formed on his face. Standing, he quickly disappeared, deciding to vamp speed towards Beacon Hill High. Scott and Styles ran through the school, following the sound of the only other heartbeat in the school. They finally reached the sound of the heartbeat. Standing in front of the girl's locker, Scott immediately began to bang on the door. Allison. Allison. Styles joined him, knowing the quicker she came out, the quicker they could find an alternate way out of the school. It didn't take long for the bathroom door to slowly open as a salt and pepper-haired man peered out the bathroom door, looking at both Scott and Styles. He was wearing common janitor clothes, and behind him stood a cart. "What are you kids doing here? And what's with all the screaming?" Scott quickly pulled out his phone as Styles looked at him like a fool before turning to the janitor. "We don't have time to explain. You have to come with us." "What are you talking about? You're not even supposed to be here." The janitor turned his nose up, looking at them. "She's not picking up. She could be in danger," Scott said as he put his phone in his pocket. "Scott, no one else is in the school. We have to leave. Who knows what if Allison was even here? Why would her aunt lie about her being here? Look around, Scott. Does this look like the place to have this conversation?" Scott paused, hearing that, before he turned to the janitor. "There's no one else in the school. We have to go," Styles said, looking at the janitor. "Do you know another way out besides the front entrance? Is this some kind of prank?" Scott made to speak, but Styles knew that wasn't good. "We're being chased by a killer, the one who attacked those kids at that warehouse. We have to get out of here before he kills us." "You sure?" "Yes, now we need to leave before he finds us." The janitor nodded, taking his keys out. He quickened his steps. He was leading them back towards the front entrance. The closest side exit was that way. "We need to find Allison." Scott voiced his concern as they followed after the janitor. "Allison's not here, Scott. You're so caught up in searching for her that you can't see the truth. Use your hearing. Do you feel another heartbeat inside the school besides Kate and the Alpha?" Turning around, the janitor noticed their whispering. "We're almost there," he said as he quickened his pace again, turning a quick corner. Neither Scott nor Styles could react to what greeted them once they turned that corner. The Alpha stood over the body of the janitor, ripping his body apart using its teeth. Raising his head, Peter's red eyes pierced both Scott and Styles, causing them to immediately turn the other way, heading back down the hallway they had come from. Entering the gym, they failed to realize the rest of the doors were locked, making it one way in, one way out. Peter soon burst through the door, looking at them both with an animalistic smile on his face. He inched forward one paw at a time. Styles and Scott backed into the bleacher, seeing no way out. They could only fight. "Scott, we have to make it through this. You for Allison, and me for my dad." Peter smiled, seeing them decide to fight. A gust of wind blew through the door, crashing into Peter, sending him sliding. "Stay away from my pack." Elias growled as his clothes began to shred, and his bones began to visibly crack. He fell on all fours as he yelled. Before that yell morphed into something darker, a howl broke through his voice as his chin slowly transformed into a snout. Midnight dark black hair began to spread throughout his whole body as his red eyes took on a darker hue, almost resembling blood itself. His hands slowly became claws, which he used to stand on all fours at that moment. He was even taller than Peter. Peter watched on in fear. His legs turned to jelly as he resisted the urge to kneel. Styles's eyes widened in excitement, seeing his friend become so monstrous. "This is awesome." Scott turned toward Styles, seeing him react so naturally left him speechless. Inside Elias's mind, a battle was currently being waged and Elias was on the losing end. His instincts screamed kill. Elias did his best to fight it. He had given his word to Derek, and who's to say he would only kill the Alpha standing in front of him? Styles and Scott were also there. If he killed the Alpha, he wasn't sure when it would stop. He had heard the stories of the Mikaelson and the massacre that followed in their wake. He didn't care about killing people, but he would at least like it to be his choice. Charging forward, he thrust his claws at Peter, drawing claw marks across his chest. Peter did his best to fight back, but compared to Elias, his Alpha form had a huge drawback. He was someone who allowed his werewolf side to control him, which led to him appearing so monstrous. He looked intimidating, but he was more like an overgrown tiger cub. He had the looks of a killer, but could never stand up to an actual adult tiger. Standing over Peter, Elias raised his claws, going for the kill, and just as his claws were about to pierce his throat, they stopped. As Elias fell backward, the fight in his head had come to an end, with Elias as the winner. He wouldn't allow his instincts to control him, not that he would never rely on them. He just wouldn't let them overtake his mind. He didn't want to be like the Alpha standing in front of him, someone who got lost in the power. Returning to his human form, Elias appeared in front of Peter, raising his foot. He kicked with all his might, hitting the exhausted Peter right in the chin, knocking him unconscious. Kate Argent sat in her car looking at the bite mark on her wrist. She was currently parked outside her brother's house. The sound of her phone ring drew her attention. Putting the phone to her ear, she listened to the sound of her brother's voice. "Kate, are you coming home tonight? I know we had a disagreement earlier, but that doesn't mean you have to leave. Kate, you there?" "Chris, I'm leaving. Tell Ollie I love her." Kate hung up as tears fell down her face. Starting the car, she hit the gas. She sped down the roads as fast as she could, even as she cried, her eyes dry. Squinting her eyes, she noticed a shadow standing in the road. Slowing down, she looked to her right, reaching for her pistol. Turning back, the shadow was gone. "Going somewhere." Mikaelson appeared on her left, a smirk on his face. "Move to the passenger's seat." Kate's eyes dilated as she moved to the passenger seat against her will. "Where are you taking me?" "Don't worry your pretty head about that." Pushing his foot on the gas, he turned the car around, heading back to Beacon Hills. Mikaelson Mansion. Elias, Stiles, and Scott sat in front of an unconscious Peter Hale. "I don't think that's enough." Stiles frowned, looking at Peter. He was currently chained to a chair. "Maybe if we grabbed some rope and tied that around him, it would be better." "If he rips through the chains, I'm pretty sure the rope won't matter." Stiles wasn't convinced. Wrapping the rope around Peter, he smiled, looking at his handiwork. It didn't take long for Derek to show up. Finding out the Alpha's identity was motivation enough. Descending the stairs, he frowned. "Peter. You know him?" Stiles pointed. "He's my uncle. You guys are sure he's the Alpha?" "He attacked us at the school." Scott clenched his fist. Stepping forward, Elias locked eyes with Derek. "I've upheld my end of the deal. You want to be an Alpha, kill him?" "He's awake," Stiles interrupted, causing everyone to look at Peter. "Derek, how are you?" Peter shook from his groggy state, eyeing his nephew. "Fine, considering you sent 2 newly turned betas to attack me." Derek scoffed. "I had to make sure you were fit to join the pack. Who wants a couple of weaklings in their pack?" "So that's why you did all this? The attack on Scott, me and Stiles, all to see if we were strong enough to join your pack?" "Yes, but that was before I realized you guys had him." Peter turned his attention to Elias with a smile on his face. "You're not a werewolf, are you? I mean, you're obviously a mixture between a vampire and something, but it's not a werewolf. Not even the demon wolf himself is capable of wiping the floor with me the same way you did. What are you?" "It doesn't matter, you won't live to see another day. Derek, this is your last chance to kill him or Stiles will." "Funny you think this is the end. No, it's only the beginning." A haughty laugh escaped Peter's mouth. "Wow, dude, your uncle is insane. What does he think some badass is gonna break through the door and save his life?" Stiles asked. "No, just my nurse," Peter said as the basement door was blown off its hinges, sent flying down the stairs. A red-haired woman slowly walked down the stairs holding a branch in her hand. She chanted, "Haec hostibus placare posses. Posses hostibus placare haec. Haec hostibus placare posses." Twisting her other hand, Elias's neck snapped, leaving him unconscious. Flicking her hand once, she sent Derek, Scott, and Stiles flying backward. Changing her chant, she gripped the branch in her hand. "In deliquium cadunt. Cadunt deliquium in deliquium cadunt." Soon the eyes of Stiles, Derek, and Scott closed as if a sweet lullaby had been played in their ears. "Hello, Jennifer," Peter smiled. "Peter." Jennifer didn't waste time raising her hand. She quickly snapped the chains. As they fell, Peter powered through the ropes. Standing up, he pulled Jennifer to his side, grinning. "What do you say we get out of here?" "But they're right here, it's the perfect time to kill them." Jennifer sported a grin similar to Peter's. "While I would usually agree with you, if this kid is what I think he is, he won't be out for much longer. Sadly, he isn't normal, or I would have forced him to join my pack." Peter pulled Jennifer up the stairs, quickly exiting the Mikaelson mansion, not looking back. Elias quickly stood up, looking around, his jaw clenched. Focusing his hearing, he relaxed when he realized everyone was alive. Today they had underestimated Peter's help. It wouldn't happen again. "What happened here?" Niklaus descends the basement stairs, seeing the door lying in the middle of the room. "A witch broke in and freed the Alpha." Elias didn't feel like talking looking at his unconscious friend lying on the ground. Even though his neck was broken, he could hear everything he had heard Peter mention to the nurse that he didn't think he was normal. He wasn't sure what it would take to kill him, but the other three were as good as dead in front of that witch in Peter. A powerful one. Why not just kill the Alpha? Niklaus knelt down examining the door. Gaining allies, dear uncle. Once Derek kills the Alpha, he'll join my pack. Never would have thought the Alpha would be his uncle though. Well, looks like you need to get to work. Good luck catching the big bad wolf. Niklaus smirked as he raised his hands, performing a roar. Turning around, he began to head back upstairs. Uncle Klaus, I could use some help. Some of your sage-like advice. Niklaus paused his steps, not turning around. Tomorrow morning you and the Stalinsky boy will meet me in the woods. Just remember this, dear nephew. I won't always be here to help you. Don't become dependent on my help. Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands. Niklaus continued going upstairs, stopping on the last step. He looked into the eyes of a frozen Kate Argent. What, the basement? Not a good enough space to keep me captive. Kate's facial expression seemed calm, but her eyes betrayed her. Seems my nephew has a couple of guests over. We're going to a much darker place, one befitting of your nature. Niklaus gripped Kate's arm, dragging her out of the house. Elias waited in the basement for his friends to wake up. First was Derek, followed by Styles, and finally, Scott, who seemed more interested in calling Allison than making sure he himself was all right. Derek, you were surprised when you saw your uncle here, why? Elias immediately asked, seeing that everyone was awake. My uncle has been in the long-term facility at the hospital since the hail fire. He's been in an unresponsive state since I came back. I visited him. His face was scarred by fire. He seemed lifeless. Guess that was the handiwork of that witch, Elias stated. His nurse, Styles, spoke up, causing everyone to focus on him. I jokingly asked him if he expected a badass to break down the door and rescue him. He replied, no, just my nurse. She was his nurse. That means we can track her down. Scott, I need you to call your mom and ask about a nurse named Jennifer. I'm not involving my mom in this. Scott stood up in a flash. They could have killed us. My mom won't stand a chance if she's involved. She stays as far away from this as possible. Fine, I'll go there myself. They won't even know I was there. Elias couldn't blame Scott for wanting to keep his mom safe. Speaking of parents being involved, I think my dad knows about werewolves. He had this video on his computer. The Alpha. Peter attacked the convenience store and his form was caught on camera. Right now my dad's the only one who's seen it. Do you think he'll tell anyone? Derek spoke up, worried. No, he's not even sure if what he saw was real. He won't risk it until he's sure he has evidence, concrete evidence. I'm more worried he'll end up putting himself in danger. He doesn't know what werewolves are capable of. I could compel him. It'll make him forget everything about the supernatural world, Elias suggested. Not happening. I'll talk to him, though I could use your help if he still doesn't believe me even after I show him. Elias nodded. From now on, everyone must have a cell phone on them at all times. Peter isn't gonna let this go. He'll come back, and he'll target one of you. We need to be careful from now on. Getting nods from everyone. Elias' side this week had been a long one. You guys head out, I'm going to get some sleep. As they left, he dropped to his knees, cradling his head. His jawline tensed as he fought the instinct to scream. Forcing himself to change back into a human was only half the battle. For the rest of the night, he fought against the instinct to turn back. Argent home. Allison stood in front of her father as he paced back and forth, beginning to speak before pacing again. Chris, she can handle it, just tell her, or I will. Victoria Argent sat on a stool next to Allison. The pendant your aunt gave you. Did you do any research on it? Allison shook her head, no, causing Chris to sigh. That pendant holds the Argent family crest. In the 18th century, a beast plagued the villages of France. Pulling out his phone, Chris quickly showed Allison a painting of the beast. Looks like a wolf, Allison said, uninterested. This would all be so much easier if I could just show you in person. Chris shook his head. Allison, go ahead and head off to bed. I need to talk to your father. Allison nodded. What are you thinking? I'm going to capture one of them. It's the only way. Chris frowned, seeing his wife's determined expression. We can't. Not when they're being protected by an original. They have one of ours. It's only right we take one of theirs. Victoria left no room for discussion. We don't know that. Kate could have just left. Without saying goodbye to Allison? You said it yourself. Kate was planning to kill an original. If you could figure it out, I'm sure he could as well. We have to do something before it's too late, and we find her body drained of its blood. Fine, but we don't tell Allison. We'll act like the earlier conversation never happened. We're going after an original. She can't be involved. Plus she's friends with Elias. If things go bad, I hope they at least let her live. Getting a nod from Victoria, Chris's shoulders relaxed as he let out a deep breath. They both failed to realize Allison sitting on the stairs listening to their every word with deep confusion written all over her face. Next day, Elias woke wondering when he had fallen asleep. Seeing that he was still in the basement, he raced up 2 flights of stairs, stopping in front of his bathroom window. His eyes were back to their regular color midnight black. Smiling, he quickly hopped in the shower. Sending Styles a text, he grabbed an apple before heading out the door. Appearing in the woods, he ate his apple in peace as he waited for his uncle and Styles to show up. Styles appeared not too long after he had parked his Jeep close by. Standing next to Elias, they made idle chatter as they waited for Niklaus to appear. Appearing in the distance, Niklaus said in a low voice, forcing the 2 boys to focus their hearing, "Well, we don't have all day." Turning around, he began to walk forward. Elias looked at Styles before they both speedwalked to Niklaus. "So what do you think he's going to teach us?" Styles said as they continued to follow Niklaus. "I don't know, probably how to kill. It's his specialty." Elias shrugged as Styles frowned. Niklaus listened to their conversation with a smirk on his face. "Well, you're right about one thing, it is my specialty." Niklaus finally stopped turning around. He leaned against a tree looking at his nephew and Styles. "Elias, when you arrived, you just sat there leaning against a tree similar to how I am currently. No doubt you were waiting on your friend here to arrive." "You were watching me?" Elias raised an eyebrow. He didn't hear or see Niklaus the whole while he waited. And he wasn't just waiting on Styles, he was waiting on Niklaus as well. "You'd much rather eat an apple than check your surroundings. With your speed, you surely had time for it." Elias frowned, even though he realized his uncle was only offering a bit of constructive criticism. "And you, Styles, I admire your will to learn, but you have to understand not everything can be taught. You have to learn some things for yourself. Remember this, your group is only as strong as its weakest member, and Styles right now, that's you. You need to work twice as hard if you want to survive the upcoming threats, and I don't mean the alpha." Elias understood that Styles was a quick learner. He had learned to control his werewolf change before the first moon even happened. "Wait, I'm not the weakest. Scott is," Styles corrected. "Scott? Oh. Him, I don't count that loser as part of Elias's pack, and I doubt Elias does either." Styles turned to Elias for confirmation. Elias couldn't deny his uncle's statement. Scott was dead weight. If he hadn't bitten him, he wouldn't bother with the guy. "Anyone who puts puppy love above the lives of his friends and family is a lost cause," Niklaus said as he eyes Styles. "Elias, he's our friend," Styles spoke. "Styles, he's your friend. From the day we've met, I've been nothing but nice to Scott, even offered to help him. But he's done nothing but chase Allison around the whole time. At most, Scott could be an Omega, and that's me being nice." Styles made to continue but was cut off by Niklaus. "You both can finish this conversation at a later date. Once again, we don't have all day. Now on to the fun bits, how to kill a witch." Niklaus smirked as he looked at his nephew. "Elias, did this witch happen to be holding or doing anything while she chanted her spells?" Elias raised an eyebrow before thinking back to that night, remembering the witch holding something in her hand. "Yeah, it was some kind of branch or stick, I don't know. Whatever it was, she was most likely channeling it. Doing so made her a lot more powerful than she actually is. Think of it as a battery. She draws her energy from, allowing her to do amazing things." "So how do we stop her?" Elias asked. "Simply take the object she's channeling away from her, or the slightly more dangerous way, kill her while she's holding it. I think projectiles will help you with your quest. I doubt she'll be alone. Peter Hale won't leave her side. Considering how easy you captured him, they'll stay united, which means you'll have to split them up. Good luck." Niklaus smiled. "Watch out for traps on your way out." Niklaus disappeared in a random direction. A silence pervaded the woods before Styles finally spoke up. "We need to talk." "Later for now. Let's try and leave these woods alive." Styles nodded as Elias took a step forward, allowing his hearing to focus on the surroundings. Taking another step forward, he frowned when nothing happened. He slowly continued forward, doing his best to stay focused, not knowing what would happen the moment he relaxed. Styles followed behind him, making sure to match his every step. Elsewhere, Niklaus smiled as he watched his nephew and Styles slowly make their way out of the woods. Disappearing, he appeared on the side of the Mikaelson mansion. He stopped in front of two doors leading to an underground shelter, looking around before opening it. Stepping inside, one would be surprised to find that the so-called underground shelter was more like an underground prison. The smell of mold forced Niklaus's nose to twitch as he continued down the steps. Soon he was standing in front of a chained-up Kate Argent. Her arms were chained to the wall, forcing her to stay standing. Yet she had still found a way to fall asleep. Grabbing a bucket of water, Niklaus splashed Kate, forcing her to wake up. "Niklaus," Kate whispered as she leaned her head forward. "I thought we had something. Why are you doing this to me?" Tears fell from her face as she lifted her chin to look at Niklaus. "Listen, Kate, I've dealt with women far crazier than you. If you think I'll fall for your tricks, you're sorely mistaken." Niklaus chuckled as he sat the bucket to the side. "Figured that wouldn't work," chuckled as a smile appeared on her face. "So how long are you going to hold me captive?" "As long as it takes." Niklaus stepped forward, gripping Kate's wrist. "Show me," Niklaus demanded as he realized the bite was gone. Seeing Kate shake her head no, Niklaus smirked. Turning around, he grabbed a duffel bag from the floor behind him. Pulling out a blade, he spun it in his hand as he walked towards Kate. Grabbing her hand, he opened her palm. As he slid the blade across her palm, he could hear her breathing accelerate. "Either you show me or I go find your niece. Remind me, what was her name again?" "Allison." A smirk appeared on his face as he watched Kate. "No, not her. Leave her out of this," Kate begged. "Show me," Niklaus demanded. "I don't know how to control it." Niklaus frowned, listening to her heartbeat. "You're lying. You've hunted werewolves your whole life. I won't ask again. Show me." Veins popped from his eyes as his canines extended. Kate trembled as she looked at Niklaus before finally her facial features began to change. Niklaus frowned as he looked at her. She looked nothing like the other when they transformed. Her skin resembled a jaguar, and her eyes glowed green. "Why do you appear to be different from the others?" "I don't know." Kate lowered her head. "Well, I know exactly where to go to get answers." Deaton stood behind his counter. Mountain ash laid beneath his feet. He was careful, who knew when a werewolf would attack. He closed the book in his hand as he heard the bell hanging above the door chime. Niklaus Mikaelson walked through that door, a smile on his face. Behind him stood Kate Argent. Her wrists were handcuffed together. In Niklaus's hand, he held a chain, one that allowed him to pull Kate Argent along. This was more to entertain himself. He was well aware Kate Argent wouldn't run. She couldn't, not when he could so easily find her niece. "Deaton, it's nice to see you again," Niklaus smirked, looking at the vet standing before him. Deaton didn't return the smile, but he knew he had to accommodate the man standing before him. Mountain ash did nothing against vampires. He would have to prepare something stronger if he was going to defend himself against an original, something he would have done if he was aware Elijah had left town. "What can I do for you, Niklaus?" "Let's talk somewhere else. Wouldn't want anyone listening in." Niklaus was a naturally paranoid man. Deaton only nodded, opening the way behind the counter. Niklaus pulled Kate along. He passed through the mountain ash easily, but as Kate tried to step past it, she was stopped by some kind of barrier that caused her skin to burn. Niklaus was surprised looking at Kate. He yanked the chain, pulling her forward once again, only for the same results to show. He kept her locked against the mountain ash barrier, eyeing the barrier suspiciously. "Interesting, you're a witch?" Niklaus slackened his hold on the chain, allowing Kate to fall to the ground. She breathed in and out heavily, looking at Niklaus, her eyes narrowed. "I'm a druid, something like a witch, only we are limited in our uses of magic." Deaton didn't explain any further, even though he could tell he hadn't eased the curiosity of Niklaus. Instead, he turned his attention to Kate Argent. He was aware of who she was. "Remove the barrier," Niklaus demanded. Deaton complied immediately, sweeping away the mountain ash with a wave of his hand. Yanking the chain, Niklaus forced Kate to her feet. "Come along." Deaton led the way to the back. Once they reached the back room, he turned back to Niklaus. "So what can I do for you?" Niklaus said nothing. Turning to Kate, he sent her a look. And although she wanted to resist, she couldn't risk it, not when Allison's life was on the line. Slowly her pulse began to rise. Her nails extended, becoming claws, as her eyes quickly changed to the color green. She didn't like the idea of transforming. She had seen herself, and she was glad she looked nothing like the werewolves she had hunted her whole life. Deaton was surprised looking at Kate. He had expected her to look like a werewolf. While there were similarities, she looked more like a jaguar. Interesting, Deaton said as he focused more on Kate. Explain, Niklaus said, causing Deaton to turn to him for a second before turning back to Kate. The bite is never a sure thing. Some people might appear to be perfect candidates for such a gift, but not everyone takes to it. Those who do become werewolves, and even then some aren't fit for such a life. Niklaus was slowly getting annoyed. Continue, he controlled himself. This bite, it could be the key to unlocking his other half. Very rarely will there be a person who, after getting bitten, they become something else. It has only been recorded a couple of times, and seeing her I'm amazed. The bite has the ability to make one resemble who they truly are on the inside. In her case, she's a mix between a werewolf and a jaguar. Niklaus nodded, turning his attention back to Kate. She avoided his gaze, although deep down she wondered what he was thinking. I don't see it. I've known her for over a week, and I think she's much more like a snake. Niklaus smirked, seeing Kate's eye twitch. We're leaving. Niklaus had gotten the information he needed. Now he needed a witch, a powerful one. Elsewhere, Elias and Styles had finally made it out of the woods. I'm starting to hate your uncle. Styles was annoyed. He spoke of traps, and yet as cautious as they hadn't discovered one trap. Elias didn't reply. Although he was also annoyed each step they took, he pushed his instincts to the limit. After making it halfway through, they had wanted to just charge through the rest, but what if he had left some traps towards the end of the forest? Now that we're out of there, we need to talk, Styles once again said, and this time Elias couldn't evade it. Scott is like a brother to me. He'll come around. This whole thing has just been so difficult for him. Styles, who hasn't it been difficult for? I haven't seen my sister or my Grams in months. Since I moved in with Grams, we've seen each other every day, but I can't go back home because of everything that's happened since I first stepped foot in Beacon Hills. Has it been easy for you to have to lie to your father and protect Scott from the dangers he seems to always put himself into? He's your friend, but has he been your friend lately? Styles' thoughts raced as he remembered all the fights he and Scott had been getting into lately. He had chalked it all up to their werewolf instincts. None of that matters. You don't know Scott like I know Scott. You've been around the supernatural world your whole life. What would you know about having your life turned upside down? Styles raised his voice as he said the last part. Styles, I went from the body of a 12-year-old to this. Elias pointed to his face. Every full moon I'm not sure if I'll be able to control myself. I could destroy this whole town in one night. None of this is easy. I've tried to kill my uncle. Have you ever had your neck broken? Elias was getting angrier every second. Styles was so focused on defending Scott, he just didn't understand why. Focusing his eyes on Styles, they began to grow red. His thoughts began to race. Styles could see it. Elias was losing control, and he knew if he attacked, he would be done for. Elias, calm down. Styles spoke slowly, keeping his eyes locked with Elias's. I am calm. Elias slowly breathed in and out, but it wasn't helping. He could feel something coming from Styles. It smelled like fear. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath before speeding the other way. He wouldn't attack Styles, not because he wanted him to be part of his pack, but because he was his friend. Elias sat on his bed, his hair laid to the side. He stared at the ceiling, ignoring the beautiful Marin, whose head rested on his shoulder. What's wrong? Marin looked up, staring at Elias's face. Nothing, he lied. It had been a week since he and Styles had their argument. He knew the timing was bad, considering Peter Hale could pop up at any second. You're lying, Marin furrowed her brow, looking at Elias. She knew that she wasn't aware of everything that went on in his life, but she could tell something was eating him up on the inside. Talk to me. Marin didn't understand why that had come out more like a question. From their very beginning of their relationship, she had always made the first move, and that was because Elias was younger, but she enjoyed it. Teaching what she liked, how their dates should go. She was skeptical at first. For someone who had never been in a relationship before, Elias was the perfect catch for any girl. He wasn't oblivious to the ways of dating. He had offhandedly mentioned that his sister and her two friends had used him as a test dummy plenty of times. Bonnie was ecstatic to help her younger brother, considering he would soon turn 13. At that time he had looked so cute she had even dressed him up as a bad boy once. A leather jacket with black jeans and Converses. Elias wasn't a fan of being a model for his sister and his friends, but he had a crush on one of her friends, so he dealt with it. It's nothing. Elias continued to stare at the ceiling. His thoughts were constantly changing. Friends thought he had seen it constantly with Bonnie and Caroline. They would argue, not talk to each other for a week, and then make up, and everything would be as if they had never gotten into an argument in the first place. Fine, you don't want to talk, I'm leaving. Maren sat up from the bed. She didn't even bother to look at Elias as she grabbed her jacket and began walking towards the door. Elias sighed, turning to Maren. He disappeared in a gust, appearing in front of the door. I'll talk, Maren smirked as she looked at him. Allison's room. Allison stared at her laptop screen, skimming over the webpage titled, Myths and Legends. What do you expect to gain from that? It says Greek mythology. Lydia pointed to the screen, causing Allison to blink twice. Ever since she had overheard her parents talking in the kitchen that night, she had been doing her best to find information on some of the words they had used when talking. At first, she had focused on the word original her parents had used in a way of referring to a person, so she searched up the original, an original, the originals, no results. After that, she did her best to remember anything else they had said, and she remembered her mother saying her Aunt Kate could end up being found drained of her blood. They weren't currently any serial killer that was fond of draining bodies of their blood and just leaving them there, so she could only turn to the supernatural. She typed in vampire, finding websites explaining their origins. Though it was obvious vampires didn't actually exist, Allison had found herself diving deeper and deeper into the information. As a group, they had watched the movie Twilight's vampires weren't the only supernatural creature in that movie, which caused her to focus on werewolves. Her father had shown her a picture of one of them, but she didn't think much of it. You'll never find what you want, not like this, Allison sighed, knowing Lydia was right. Turning to her, she could see her filing away at her nails. Lydia soon noticed she was being stared at as she looked up from her nails. What? I may not be able to find what I want, but I'm sure you can. Allison eased the laptop towards Lydia while keeping eye contact with her. Not happening. Lydia lifted her hand, showing her nails to Allison. You see these nails? They have to be perfect. The semi-formal's coming up soon. Lydia, we still have 2 weeks, and it's not like you have a date anyways. Allison frowned, looking at her friend. Like you said, we still have 2 weeks, and I may not have a date right now, but I'll definitely have one before then. You mean Styles? Lydia froze, hearing that, looking at Allison, who smiled evilly. Maybe I'll just get to Scott to ask him for you. Fine, you win. What'll I look like? People think I was forced to ask someone out when it's supposed to be the other way around. Lydia grabbed the laptop, moving the cursor to the search bar. She began to type. The background of the computer quickly changed, becoming dark as white letters began to show above the search bar. Is that the dark web? Allison asked as she moved closer to Lydia to get a better view of the screen. Lydia turned to Allison with a small smile on her face. Yep, the P popped as she continued to type. You were going about the search the wrong way from what you've told me about the conversation with your parents. It's obvious they're hiding something from you. Your aunt gave you the first hint when she gave you that pendant. Allison looked down, remembering that Kate had encouraged her to look into the history of their family. Mikaelson mansion. Elias rested his head on the lap of Maren. He had just finished narrating the events that led up to the argument between Styles and himself. It was nice being able to talk to someone about it. He didn't feel like he was in the wrong. He had even agreed to accept Scott as an Omega. An Omega in a Lycan pack would definitely be stronger than even an Alpha werewolf. Why can't you just accept Scott as a Beta? Omegas were the weakest member of the pack. They would usually be abused. Elias didn't get angry. He wasn't aware of how Omegas were treated in other packs, but he just didn't think he could trust Scott. If he couldn't trust him, how could he ever be a Beta in his pack? I can't trust him. Elias looked into her eyes. You don't have to trust him. Peter Hale could show up at any moment. You're the only one that can stop them. Without Styles, you'll never get rid of that witch. If accepting Scott as a Beta means stopping them, you gotta do it. Elias nodded. He knew she was right. Stopping Peter was at the top of their to-do list. They couldn't ignore each other for much longer. Now it's time we talk about something else. Elias raised an eyebrow hearing that. Maren caressed his jaw as she looked down at him. I'm leaving for college soon. Elias quickly raised his head from her lap, staring into her eyes. When? He said. As soon as I get the go-ahead from the principal. Elias nodded, not knowing what to say. They were only getting closer, but she was going to be leaving soon. I know what you're thinking. I feel the same way. It sucks things were just starting to go good. Maren smiled sadly, moving closer to Elias. She leaned in, her lips meeting his. Before I leave, Maren kissed Elias again. We're definitely smashing. Maren lowered her arms, running her hands all over Elias' abs. Grabbing his shirt, she pulled it upwards, effectively removing it from his body. "Oh, you mean now?" Elias said with a shocked look on his face. Looking at him, Maren smiled before pushing him down on the bed. Leaning down, she continued to kiss him, cupping his cheek with her hand. Elias didn't remain frozen, bringing his hands down to her waist before lowering them again. This time he gripped her rear end. Sitting up, Maren removed her top. Throwing it to the side, removed her bra next. "You're beautiful," Elias said as he watched her strip ever so slowly. Maren didn't reply, smiling ever so slightly. She lowered her hands to his jeans, helping him remove them while he kissed her neck. "Why are you so good at this?" Maren asked while he moved from her neck to her bosom. His lips suckled her melon, while his teeth would sometimes nibble on her buds. His actions only made her nether regions wetter. "Caroline may have had a Shota complex," Elias smiled, looking up at Maren. "Don't stop," Maren said with furrowed brows. She didn't care about Caroline, at least she didn't at this moment. The pleasure he gave her overpowered her thoughts. Elias laughed a little before returning his attention to her breast. Maren quickly removed her own jeans before pulling Elias up and kissing him again. Allison's room. Allison stared at the computer scene with a frown on her face. Even with Lydia's help, they had found nothing. Lydia was looking at her friend with pity in her eyes. She could tell Allison wouldn't give up, not when her aunt's life was on the line. "I don't know what they're hiding, but whatever it is, Elias is connected to it." Allison's eyes shined with determination. Elsewhere in a dark room, two figures could be seen sitting in the darkness. Peter Hale sat off to the side, his attention focused on the book in his hand. "What's the plan? We can't hide in your family's vault forever." Jennifer, Peter Hale's nurse, and powerful, which played with the branch in her hand. "We're not hiding, but to deal with the originals, I'll need some help. There's only one person that I know for sure with that kind of power." Peter didn't look up from the book in his hand as he flipped to the next page. "You mean Marcus? We don't even know if he exists. Not to mention that if he does, he would never help us," Jennifer said, causing Peter to shut the book in his hand. "It isn't a question of whether he exists or not. I used to wonder if the Mikaelson family was real, and now they're here running around as if they run Beacon Hills. I can't kill them, but I know someone who can, and in exchange, I'll give him the information he's been searching for." Peter smiled like a maniac. Scott McCall stood at his locker. He was digging through it looking for a book. He was surprised when Jackson approached, leaning against the locker next to his, a smug look on his face. Realizing who it was, Scott couldn't help but sigh. "What do you want, Jackson?" Scott said through gritted teeth. Jackson had been a staple in his side since high school had started. "I know what you are." Jackson paused. He watched as Scott did his best not to react, but he could see the worry growing on his face. "What are you talking about?" Scott wasn't very good at acting calm while under pressure. "Look, I don't care how you do it, but you're going to get me whatever you and Stalinsky took to turn you into." Jackson paused again, this time rising his hands above his head as he showed his teeth like a monster, leaving Scott to understand what he meant. "Or I'll be the first to tell Allison, who knows she might run into my arms with fear in her eyes just looking for comfort." Jackson laughed as he walked away. Scott frowned as he watched Jackson walk away. Allison finding out was one thing he hoped would never happen. He didn't want her to see him for a monster. The bigger problem was it wasn't only his secret. Stiles might understand Jackson finding out, but Derek and Elias would probably kill him. He didn't like Jackson, but he didn't want him dead. Closing his locker, he turned around just in time to see Stiles walk into the school. He no longer wore a buzz cut. His hair was beginning to grow. Looking at him, Scott had to admit he looked completely different from the first day of school. "Stiles, we have a problem." Scott joined Stiles at his locker. Stiles raised an eyebrow, looking at his friend. It seemed every time they met up there was a problem. Life just wasn't going the way either of them had expected. A small bit of his mind went towards the conversation he had with Elias. He didn't want to think bad of Scott, but the seed had been planted. "What's up?" Scott quickly retold the events that had taken place not too long ago with Jackson. Stiles frowned once Scott had finished, making Scott nervous. He was afraid he would call Elias, but luckily he didn't. He wasn't currently aware of the argument that had happened between Elias and Stiles, even though he was at the center of it all. He might be bluffing. Did he say the word werewolf? Stiles was hoping he was bluffing, otherwise he would have to think of a way to silence him without someone else killing him. Scott shook his head, but he did say we were monsters. If he approaches again, ignore him unless he uses the word werewolf. Don't give anything away. Let's hope he's bluffing. Stiles closed his locker, turning to his friend. He nodded and Scott did the same. Thanks, Styles. No problem, Scott. Styles threw his book bag over his shoulder as he and Scott began to walk towards their classes. No, I mean it, Styles, you've had my back throughout all of this. And I know I haven't exactly been the best friend lately. Scott wanted to continue but was cut off by Styles. Scott, I know things have been hectic lately, but no matter what, I'll always have your back. Styles was a loyal friend. He was aware of Scott's faults, but he believed he would come around. He just hoped he did before Elias made his decision. Lunch. The sound of chatter filled the lunchroom, but oddly things didn't seem chaotic. Scott sat at the lunch table he and Styles had sat at since freshman year. Lately, they had been joined by a couple more people. Some Scott didn't mind, but some he did. Luckily, the person he didn't want to see wasn't there. He had left with his girlfriend to have lunch elsewhere outside of school. He could actually hear Lydia and Allison talking about him right now. Why hasn't Maren been at lunch lately? She gives the best advice. Allison turned to Lydia with a questioning look on her face. She's graduating soon, probably right after the formal. She's spending as much time with Elias as she can before she leaves. Scott frowned before turning back to Allison. He could tell she was sad to hear that. He couldn't help but wonder how it would feel if he only had a couple of days left to spend time with Allison. McCall, can you hear me? Jackson's voice caused Scott to turn his head, looking all throughout the cafeteria, but with all the people there he couldn't find him. So you can hear me? Jackson chuckled, causing Scott to clench his fist. When he had heard Jackson's voice, he turned to look for him on instinct. He knew Jackson had him now. Here comes Stalinsky. I know he can hear me too. Styles walked through the cafeteria, his tray in his hands. Unlike Scott, he didn't react to the voice of Jackson. Taking his seat in front of Scott, he shook his head. Don't react. Scott put his head down, looking at his tray. Listen here, you losers. I want whatever it is that turned you both into werewolves. And I want it today. Or maybe I'll tell both Allison and Lydia, after that the whole school. Jackson wasn't an idiot. When Derek scratched him with his claws, the doctor had told him the plant growing from his neck was wolfsbane. He did his own research, and considering how horrible Derek looked that day, he could tell something was wrong with him. Wolfsbane, the name is self-explanatory. After a little digging on the internet, he came up with a theory. Derek was a werewolf, and so was Scott and Styles. Styles sighed, hearing that it was time for Plan B. Follow me, Scott. Styles quickly stood from his seat, walking in the direction of Jackson. He was hiding behind a pillar. He could see Scott, but Scott couldn't see him. Styles didn't even say anything to him. Simply grabbing him by the arm, he led him out of the cafeteria, ignoring the curious looks they got on the way out. Stalinsky, what are you doing? Hurt me, and I'll sue you. Styles ignored him. Entering the boys' locker room, he tossed Jackson against the wall. Scott entered behind him, looking confused. Styles, what are we doing? Don't worry, Scott. Styles pulled out his phone, pulling up a video. It was the video of Jackson and Danny making out in the boys' bathroom. He kept it as collateral. He wasn't aware something like this would happen, but he didn't like Jackson, so he would have found a way to use it against him regardless. Pointing the screen towards Jackson, he watched as his face turned white before anger and then fear. Why do you have that? Lydia promised to delete it. Styles smiled hearing that, and Jackson knew that look. Even Scott knew it. It was the look Jackson had every time he saw them in the hallway, the satisfaction of knowing he was better. Here's the deal. You leave Scott and me alone. You never mention that werewolves exist, and maybe someone won't show up one day to erase your memories. I won't share this video with the whole school, not to mention I'm saving your life. What do you think would happen if people found out you knew about the supernatural world? You wouldn't live to see the sunrise. Jackson was lucky Elias wasn't at school. Had he caught even a whiff of this, Jackson may have ended up dead. Styles was aware of this, and he didn't want to see anyone dead, so he was hoping this did the trick. If not, he would have to go to Elias. Are you sure you need all of us there? Elias kept his eyes on the road while driving. Elias, you can't avoid this forever. Not when Peter Hale can strike at any moment, Maren said from the passenger seat. She was doing her best to get Elias to reconnect with Styles, and Elias understood that it's the reason he wasn't fighting. Styles was a good friend. In fact, he was the first friend he made in high school. He didn't count Lydia since she kind of forced him to be her friend. Today was the day that girls called on their friends and went shopping for dresses. Elias didn't look forward to it. If they were anything like Bonnie, they would be up there for a while. He frowned as he came to that realization. Finally figured it out. Maren chuckled as she looked at her boyfriend. We'll take our time. I expect you and Styles to be made up by the time we leave, or else. Elias knew what she meant by that. Ever since they had first had sex, they had been going at it constantly. It wasn't something that was required every day, but he did look forward to it, especially since Maren would be leaving after the dance. She had already got the go-ahead from the principal. She would be graduating early. Elsewhere, Styles stood before Lydia with a small frown on his face. She had just told him that Elias and Maren would be at the dress shop, and he had already promised her he would go with her, so there was no turning back. "What does it matter if Elias is there or not?" Scott asked with a confused look on his face. "He didn't tell you?" Lydia raised an eyebrow, looking at Scott. "Tell me what?" "Nothing." Styles interrupted, turning to Lydia with narrowed eyes. She sent him a small smile before walking back towards Allison. "Styles, what's going on?" "Elias and I got into a disagreement," Styles said to Scott as a confused look appeared on his face. "Scott, do you know what an Omega is?" "Nope." Styles expected that. What good would it do Scott to understand pack hierarchy? An Omega is the weakest of the pack, not even trusted with the simplest of tasks. Beaten and abused, so the other pack members may feel better. On the next full moon, Elias will create his pack. He will be the Alpha, Derek and I will be Betas, but the best you could be is an Omega. That's what you two argued about, whether I should be a Beta or an Omega. Do either of you think I want to be part of his pack? Scott couldn't help but feel angry. He had made it pretty clear he had no intention of being part of any kind of pack. "Scott, you don't understand. Do you think a lone wolf can take on someone like Peter Hale? Forget Peter Hale, there are however many vampires out there that could kill us before we even saw them. So how about for once, since this whole thing started, you listen and do what I say. Don't do anything stupid. I'll convince Elias that you should be a Beta." Scott nodded. He knew he didn't have what it took to survive alone in the supernatural world. How would he protect his mother? The group of four soon split into groups of 2 Styles, and Scott would drive in Styles's Jeep, while Allison would drive Lydia. Dress shop. Elias and Maren arrived before the rest, and as Maren looked around the shop, he sat against a wall watching her. He wasn't ready to let her leave, but he couldn't very well stop her, not when it was her future on the line. As he watched her, he noticed the sound of Lydia and Allison laughing. They were close by, and as they entered they ran straight to Maren. "I feel like we haven't seen each other in weeks," Lydia said as she looked at Maren, raising an eyebrow. "Your brother said you've been at Elias's a lot lately. How is he?" "Lydia, he's right there," Allison said as she caught sight of Elias. "Allison, chill, it's not like he can hear us." Maren smiled, hearing Lydia say that. Oh, how wrong she was. But Maren didn't mind answering the question. Elias stopped listening as he heard the voices of Scott and Styles. He had thought long and hard about whether he should accept Scott as a Beta or not, and he had decided against it. "Let's talk," Elias said as Styles stopped in front of him. He ignored Scott as he exited the dress shop. He walked outside. The sun was high in the sky, leaving little to no shade. The sun didn't have an effect on him. In fact, the warmth felt amazing. As he stopped in front of his car, he turned around to look at both Styles and Scott. "Scott will be an Omega, at least until he proves I can trust him. As an Omega he will have the same respect a Beta does," Elias said. "He should be a Beta. I know him more than anyone. He doesn't need to prove himself." Styles immediately fired back, and Elias knew nothing had changed in the time they hadn't talked. Styles was still fixated on Scott being a Beta. "He doesn't deserve to be a Beta," Styles wanted to reply, but he was cut off. "Styles, he's right. Ever since this began I've done nothing but run from it. They can't trust me, and at least this way I won't be an Omega forever." Scott couldn't believe he was saying this, but he knew it was the right thing to do. He was aware of how dangerous Peter Hale was alone, but now he had a super powerful which helping him. They would never be able to stop him if they continued to fight amongst themselves. Elias raised an eyebrow hearing Scott say that, but Styles on the other hand was baffled. "Styles, what are you talking about? You shouldn't be an Omega, you should be a Beta like me." "I will be, just not today." Scott smiled, seeing his friend fight so hard for him. "Scott." "Styles, why are you so hellbent on Scott being a Beta?" Elias couldn't help but ask. "We're brothers. If I don't fight for him, who will?" That was it. Elias realized that even though he and Styles were friends, they were nowhere near as close as he and Scott were. He was slightly jealous. He wanted that bond. He got such a thing from his family, but that was different. It was unconditional. The bond Scott and Styles held was in a way similar to the bond between his father and his uncle, only they hadn't tried to kill each other as many times. "Scott, I'll be waiting on the day you prove yourself worthy of being a Beta," Elias said before walking past both him and Styles back into the dress shop. He and Styles hadn't completely made back up, but it was a start, and he didn't feel like putting in any more effort. Any sightings of Peter and his nurse? Elias heard the voice of Styles as he followed him back into the shop. Nope, it's like they disappeared. I doubt even my uncle could track him down. Elsewhere, Peter Hale stood in the woods observing the lacrosse field from a distance. On the field, he could see a teenager taking his anger out on his lacrosse stick. Peter smirked as he watched him. Jackson had been practicing for the last hour, but no matter how many shots he made, it did little to appease the anger he felt on the inside. Styles had completely played him, bringing his dreams and hopes of the future to a halt. Hate was boiling inside his heart, and he would even sell his soul to the devil if it meant he could become a werewolf. Jackson. Peter Hale knew exactly what Jackson was currently thinking. His nurse Jennifer had been watching Elias and Styles for the past couple days. Elias had done nothing but lay in bed with Maren all day, but she had seen the exchange Styles had with Jackson. Peter was here to use him to his advantage. Giving him the bite was a small price to be paid. "Who are you?" Jackson said through deep breaths. "I'm the one who can give you what you want. You want to be like Styles, and Scott, you just have to do me one little favor." Peter revealed a devilish smirk as he finished his sentence. It was finally the day of the semi-formal, and while a lot of people were looking forward to it, Elias wasn't. The last couple of days had felt like a countdown to him, a countdown to the day Maren would have to leave. He sighed as he thought about it, but there was nothing he could do. He had decided that for today he would just be the perfect date. Looking through his closet, he quickly found the suits his father had specifically tailored for him. Usually he wouldn't even look at them, but this was a special occasion. He grabbed a black Italian suit jacket with pants to match it. He wasn't exactly sure what kind of shirt to wear, so he just grabbed a navy blue dress shirt with a matching tie. He couldn't consult anyone since he hadn't seen his uncle in days, and he wasn't sure when his father would return. He stood in front of the mirror with a small smile on his face. He was starting to understand why his father wore such suits. He felt stiff, but looking in the mirror, that small discomfort seemed worth it. He looked dashing. The suit fit him perfectly, and he kind of resembled his father. He was sure Maren would melt once she saw him approach. His sand-colored skin made it, so people guessed that he was a mixture of two races. His dark-colored hair only made his obsidian-colored eyes more appealing. Elias smiled before tucking his cufflinks and vanishing in a show of speed. He ran across town, soon appearing in front of Maren's house. The Porsche was already parked on the street. It was an odd request, but she wanted to be the one to drive to the dance. Elias raised his right hand, knocking on the door. In most situations, someone other than the date would open the door, but it seemed that Deaton wasn't currently at home. Maren opened the door wearing an olive green dress. She decided against the hills, wearing flats instead. Her hair was tied up, and Elias could hear her heart practically jump out of her chest as she looked at him. Stepping forward, the smell of lilac and gooseberries flooded his nostrils. He honestly wanted to kiss her right now, but he knew he wouldn't be able to stop himself, and her makeup wouldn't be the only thing that ended up ruined. "You ready to go?" Elias asked with a smile on his face. "Wait," Maren said, pulling him inside. The lights were still on. She let go of his hands as she entered another room before returning to his side. "Take a picture of us." Elias smiled once again, disappearing. Swiping the camera from her hands, he appeared in front of them, looking through the camera. He pressed the snap button, appearing next to Maren. He vanished again before the camera hit the ground. He was there to catch it. He had put the camera on burst mode, so there wasn't only one picture of them but a bunch. He handed the Maren the picture, allowing her to take a look. "You're good," Maren said as she continued to look through the pictures. "Once again, I credit that to Bonnie and her friends. Only the best pictures make it in the end." Maren laughed as she imagined Elias taking picture after picture at the whim of his older sister. "Well, we have a dance to get to." Elias reached a hand out, waiting on Maren. She grinned before grabbing it and pulling Elias outside. She locked the door behind her as she walked toward the Porsche. "I love your car. How about leaving her with me? I'll need something to remember you by." Elias raised an eyebrow, looking at her. He knew she was joking, and it wasn't like he needed the car. He was faster than it, but he had only now thought about giving her something to remember him by. "What are you going to give me?" Maren smiled at the question. "You'll see." She winked mysteriously before opening her door and climbing inside. Elias chuckled before climbing inside the passenger seat. He had half a mind to say skip it and just carry her on his back, Twilight style. Maybe he could even ditch the dance, but he knew she wouldn't want that. For some reason, this dance mattered to her, and that was more than enough reason for him. The car started and Elias couldn't help but stare at Maren. His thoughts had flowed back to getting her something to remember him by. She drove slow, well to him. It was slow as Maren pulled into the school parking lot. She let out a heavy sigh. What's wrong? This is it, my first and last dance. Elias was stunned by her words. I thought that I had been to a school dance before. Maren turned to stare into the eyes of Elias. I'm guessing you didn't go by choice. With your looks, there's no way you were never asked before. Before meeting you, I was mostly focused on school. All the more reason to make this the best night ever. School. Maren pulled into the parking lot. Elias had kept his eyes on her the whole way there. He opened his car door, stepping outside just in time to see Styles pull up in his Jeep. It had only been a couple of days since the dress shop. Things were still rough, but they were communicating at the very least. Elias sent a nod his way before walking to the driver's side of the car. Reaching down, he pulled the door open. He extended his hand, helping Maren out of the car. She smiled as she looked at him. Thunk. They were both drawn to the sound. Styles froze in his spot as he turned back to the door he had just slammed shut. Elias could tell he was nervous. If the erratic beating of his heart was anything to go by. Styles shook his head before walking around to the passenger seat of his Jeep. He helped Lydia out the car with a silly smile on his face. Maren locked eyes with Lydia, smiling at her friend. Lydia smiled back before taking Styles's arm, heading towards the gym. Maren did the same. They walked side by side. The night was going well so far. The gym had been transformed into the average-looking dance room. Purple lights lit up the room as black and white balloons littered the floor. How about some punch? Elias asked, getting a nod from Maren. Let's go, Styles. Elias turned his attention to Styles, who was too busy staring at Lydia to acknowledge him. Elias sighed, dragging Styles towards the punch bowl. Dude, what are you doing? I was just about to ask Lydia to dance. Really? 'Cause to me, it looked like you were too busy staring at her face to do anything. Styles raised an eyebrow hearing that. I was staring? Elias nodded. Of course I was staring. Have you seen her? Not like you haven't been staring at Maren. Maren's my girlfriend. I'm allowed to stare, but you might be weirding Lydia out. You think she thinks I'm weird? Oh god, I'm gonna mess this whole thing up. Styles walked toward the punch, pouring himself a cup before drinking the whole cup. Just pronounce your words and try not to stare for too long, Elias said, laughing on the inside. He could tell how much Styles wanted things to work out with Lydia. Isn't Scott supposed to be here? Elias didn't know why, but he expected Allison and Scott to be the first couple in here. He and Allison are having a date somewhere else since Scott's grades are so bad coach banned him from the dance. Alright man, just remember to breathe. Elias laughed as he grabbed the punch he had poured for himself and Maren. Walking back to her side, he watched as she and Lydia talked about each other's dresses. Elias put the cups down before grabbing Maren's hands. He led her into the crowd of students dancing with a smile on his face. The song playing was an upbeat pop song. Not the greatest of choices, but something they could dance to. Styles made his way back over to Lydia. Remembering to breathe, he passed her a cup of punch before taking a seat next to her. She looked amazing, and it seemed to be the only thing he could think about. She wore a silver dress with a black ribbon wrapped around her waist. She smelled like roses, something he had gotten used to while in the car ride here. He was on a date with the girl of his dreams. Styles took a sip of his cup before placing it back down on the table. He had steeled his resolve. He was going to ask Lydia to dance. As he made to stand up, the sound of buzzing forced him to rethink his strategy. Lydia's pulled out her phone from her purse hanging from her shoulder. Styles watched as a frown appeared on her face. Is everything all right? It's Jackson. I've been asking for him to return my key for weeks, and he says he's finally agreed. I'll be right back. I'm just gonna meet him on the lacrosse field. When I get back, we're dancing. Styles nodded. Deep down, he didn't want to let her go. Especially not to go see that prick Jackson. He thought about following her for a second, but decided not to in the end. Jackson wouldn't risk his secret just to tell Lydia. Lydia made her way through the halls before exiting the school. She calmly walked to the lacrosse field. Seeing Jackson, she made her way to him. Where is it? Don't worry, Lydia, your key's right here. Jackson reached into his pocket, pulling out a key. Walking to Lydia, he handed it to her. I'm sorry. It's fine, I should have seen it. There were so many signs. I guess I let love blind me. Lydia turned to head back to the gym. I don't think that what he's apologizing for. Lydia. A voice she had never heard before stopped her in her tracks. With a curious look on her face, she turned back to see an older man wearing all black clothes standing where Jackson once stood with his hands behind his back. "Jackson, you've made good on your end of the deal. Let me return the favor." Jackson paused, looking at Peter, fear in his eyes. "Well, come on, I don't have all day. I have a couple of teenagers to terrorize." Jackson slowly walked to Peter. Impatience could be seen on the face of Peter. He was no doubt wondering why he had approached Jackson. He could have just stolen his phone and texted Lydia himself. Losing his patience, Peter grabbed Jackson's arm, pulling down his sleeve. His canines extended as his eyes shined a ruby red, his teeth clamped on the forearm of Jackson, drawing blood. "That should do it," Peter said, wiping the blood from his mouth. Turning to a shocked Lydia, a smile appeared on his face. "You can leave now." Jackson once again hesitated. Even if he was never in love with Lydia, he didn't want to be the reason she died. "You won't kill her, right?" "Maybe, maybe not." "You should leave before I decide to kill you." Jackson got the message, immediately heading back towards the school. "Jackson!" Lydia yelled terror in her voice. She regretted ever reading that text. She could have stayed in the gym with Styles. At least she wouldn't be standing in front of whatever she was currently standing in front of. As she thought about the red eyes Peter had shown for a moment, she remembered something from looking up Allison's family history. "I need your phone." "What?" A confused look appeared on Lydia's face. "Give me your phone," Peter said each word slowly, and Lydia nodded. Reaching into her purse, she tossed Peter the phone. "I'm on the lacrosse field, my heel broke, could use your help," Peter said before pressing send. He looked up from the phone with a grin on his face as Lydia looked at him with a disgusted look. "What, not good enough?" "I would never break a hail," Peter chuckled, hearing that he knew Lydia was afraid he could hear the pulsing of her heartbeat, but to think she could appear so calm on the outside was amazing. "Don't worry, Styles is head over heels for you. He'll rush here regardless." Peter was right, and as they spoke, Styles rushed out of the gym, speed walking towards Lydia. As he walked towards the entrance towards the lacrosse field, he ran into Jackson. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be with Lydia." As Styles spoke, his eyes focused on the red liquid staining Jackson's shirt sleeve. His nose flared, immediately recognizing the smell. "Why are you bleeding?" "I'm not telling you anything, Stalinsky. I'll be just like you soon, and when I am, well, it's a good thing you're not like me yet." Styles reached forward, grabbing Jackson by the neck before pushing him towards the locker. Jackson was a coward. One wouldn't think that by the confidence he usually exuded, but it was all a false exterior, something Styles had recently noticed. "Talk or I might just squeeze too hard," Styles said, hoping it sounded as awesome as he thought, and judging by the squirming Jackson, he was right. Peter Hale, lacrosse field. Styles immediately dropped Jackson. Running down the hall, he pushed the door open before running even faster towards the lacrosse field. Lydia stood in the lacrosse field, Peter Hale arm-wrapped neck. He stood with a smile on his face, contrary to the fear-stricken Lydia, now doing her best to keep from crying. "Let her go," Styles said as he came to a stop. He wouldn't be reckless enough, Peter, on a regular day, let alone when he held Lydia hostage. "Styles, now you know I can't do that, not when the fun's only just begun." Peter ran a finger through Lydia's hair. "What do you want?" "Answers." All right, ask me anything, just please don't hurt her." "Has Elias ever spoken about his mother? A name, how she looked, anything?" "No," Styles answered resolutely as Peter listened to his heartbeat. "I'm sure it's a tricky subject," Peter said before taking a second to think of his next question. "What about problems during the full moon, extreme anger, uncontrollable thirst?" "I'm pretty sure we all go through that." "That not the kind of answer I'm looking for." Peter raised a hand, showing his sharpened fingernails. "Yes, everything you said, it's been changing every full moon." Styles didn't want to answer, but he was sure Peter was listening to his heartbeat. It's what he would do. "Has he ever mentioned aging overnight? Like one day he was a kid, the next he was a teenager?" "Nope, never heard anything about that." Peter raised an eyebrow hearing that. He had finally found the information he had been searching for. He wasn't so sure at first, but now he was. Marcus had been searching for someone like him for the past 12 or 13 years. Once Peter became an alpha, he was visited by another alpha. They all worked for a stronger alpha, and he wasn't referring to Deucalion. He was simply a proxy, someone Marcus used as the face of terror. Every alpha was given the same order. If they ever came across someone like Elias, they were to immediately contact Deucalion. Peter wasn't sure, but he hoped Marcus himself would show up. He wasn't sure a pack of alphas had what it took to destroy the Mikaelsons. Looking to Styles, he smirked before his fangs elongated, and he tore into the shoulder of Lydia. As he let her fall, Styles charged to her, catching her before she hit the grass. "Don't blame yourself, I would have bitten her regardless." Peter disappeared into the woods, leaving Styles with a wounded Lydia. Peter had people to contact. Jennifer was right, they couldn't hide forever. "Elias, I was foolish, childish even. My father had told me the stories. My uncle had exaggerated a little, but I could tell almost all of what he told me was the truth. I was young before the change. Magically aging overnight was something no one could expect. Maybe had I asked more questions, I would have been prepared for what was to come." Peter Hale was only the beginning, although if I was being honest, even he was trouble. I hadn't taken him seriously. In fact, I don't think any of us actually took any of this seriously. I was foolish because I didn't realize it wouldn't be me in pain. I wouldn't be the one dying while my friends watched on, unable to move. I wasn't exactly close with Scott, but I didn't wish for him to die. Not like that. Beacon Hills High School. Elias and Marin moved in sync as the DJ at the dance had finally decided to play a slow song. Marin placed her head on Elias' chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Such a sound brought her to peace. A small smile could be seen on Elias' face as he wrapped his arms around Marin. This moment would hopefully be something both he and Marin could look back on in the future and smile. Unfortunately, the moment wasn't meant to last, as the sound of his cell phone ringing brought him back to reality. For someone with his hearing, ignoring it was practically impossible, and yet he persevered, doing his best to ignore it. "Answer it, who knows, it might be important." Marin looked up at him with a smile on her face. "More important than the moment we're currently sharing?" Elias asked, causing her to shake her head. "At least see who it's from." Elias nodded, pulling out his phone. He raised an eyebrow as he saw Styles' name. Looking around the gym, he immediately realized he wasn't there. Using his hearing, he closed his eyes, taking in every sound in the gym. That was when he realized it. He couldn't hear anything beyond the gym, as if there was nothing outside. Looking down at his phone, he immediately answered the phone. "Styles, where are you?" "I'm at the lacrosse field. It's Lydia. Get here quickly." Elias could hear the pain in his voice. Looking up at Marin, he could see the worry in her eyes. "We have to get to the lacrosse field." Marin nodded before beginning to walk towards the gym doors, only for Elias to shake his head. Ignoring the shriek that left her mouth as he picked her up, they vanished. Stopping in front of Styles, he let Marin down before kneeling down next to his friend. "What happened?" Tears were already in Styles' eyes. Lydia laid unconscious in his arms. "Peter, he bit her. He was going to kill her. Styles, calm down. What did Peter want?" Elias placed a hand on his shoulder as he gave Styles a comforting nod. "He wanted to know about you. He asked about your mom, the effects the full moon had on you. He also asked about the aging, but I lied." Styles said through tears. "It's fine, Styles." "No, it's not. He was listening to my heartbeat. Even after that, he still bit Lydia. This is my fault. I shouldn't have asked her to the dance. Maybe she wouldn't dash." "Styles, I have a feeling that even if you didn't, he still would have bit Lydia. He needs a pack. It's the reason he was in the woods that night." "Jackson, he bit Jackson." Styles looked up at Elias with a knowing look. "You guys can talk about this later. Lydia needs to go to a hospital," Marin said, interrupting the conversation. "No, she's been bitten. Chances are she'll change. Waking up in a hospital during that would suck. We're taking her to my house, Marin." "Styles, we're taking your Jeep. My car won't be enough for all of us." Styles fished through his pockets, pulling out his Jeep keys, handing them to Elias. Picking up Lydia, he looked down at her with who knows what going through his mind. "I have a feeling Peter has been planning this since he escaped. Someone cast a spell on the gym so that I wouldn't be able to hear what was going on outside of it. We've been caught up in our own problems. We should have been ready." Elias led the way deep inside, feeling a hint of guilt. Before long, they were in the parking lot. "Marin, you should follow us in my car." Marin nodded, fishing in her own purse for his keys. She had driven to the dance and was already used to driving the car. Opening the back door of Styles' Jeep, he allowed him to place Lydia in the car. Styles climbed in behind her, holding her tightly. "She's gonna be all right, Styles." Getting no reply, Elias started the Jeep. "Hale family vault." Peter stepped out of the shadows, walking over to Jennifer. He now had all the information he needed to contact Marcus. He only hoped he would show up himself. Whatever his plans were, he was sure they included Elias. He himself understood how difficult it would be to go after him. With a grin, he thought about how Marcus would reward him. He had heard the tales. Those that joined his pack became stronger than regular alphas. He wanted that. That old hunter would show up soon, and then his revenge would be complete. The strength he would get from Marcus would make achieving it easier. "It's time to send the message," Peter said, getting a nod from Jennifer. Argent House. Chris waited anxiously on the couch. Victoria had left earlier without telling him. He only hoped she hadn't gone ahead and started without him. This whole thing was stupid. Kill an original? If it was that simple, they would have died ages ago. None of the information he tracked down had led to anything worthwhile. Standing up, he looked towards the door with a worried face as his wife entered. Grocery bags were in her hand as she hummed a tune. As she locked eyes with Chris, she spoke. "What? I thought that I went to hunt down an original?" Before Chris could reply, she spoke again. "I may hate them, but I'm not foolish. They'll get what's coming for them. For Kate, but right now we must bide our time." Sighing, Chris realized he had underestimated his wife's fortitude. This was the reason females led the family. "Are you just going to stand there, or are you going to help me with the groceries?" Looking at her, he smiled before following her out the door. As he helped her carry the groceries, he failed to notice the vervain inside the bags. "Mikaelson Manor, did Scott pick up?" Elias asked Styles, who only shook his head in response. He was getting worried. For some reason, Elias could feel it. First Lydia, and now Scott was out there with Allison without any help. He understood why Styles was beginning to worry, but he needed him focused. "Derek's on the way. We need to regroup. This whole time we've been on the defense. This time we're attacking, and we're ending this forever." Elias refused to watch as Peter picked them off one by one. Styles and Lydia were literally within hearing distance, and he had failed to realize they were in danger due to magic. As long as they continued to live their regular lives, they would always be in danger. It was time to take a page out of his uncle's book and destroy his enemies. For now, just watch over Lydia. Once Derek arrives, we'll think of a plan, and I'll need your help. Elias patted Styles on the shoulder before walking over to Marin. She was next to a sleeping Lydia. They all understood what kind of danger she was in. They had heard the saying, "Not everyone takes the bite." "She'll be okay," Marin said as Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sure she will." At first he had thought Lydia was annoying. He didn't like fake things, which is why at first he wasn't a fan of her. Once she stopped acting, it became hard not to like her. He understood how Styles had been in love with her since the 3rd grade. He couldn't help but smile. Styles had been the first person to see Lydia for what she truly was. She would pull through. She had to pull through. He was half tempted to give her some of his blood. If she didn't pull through, she would become a vampire, only now wasn't the time for that. Scott's house. Scott laid on the couch with Allison, resting her head against his chest. With everything going on, neither of them felt like going to the dance. On the kitchen table, there were 2 plates, candles, and flowers. Scott had worked up the courage to cook for both of them. He wasn't necessarily good, but following the recipe he got from his mom made the food taste okay. Now they were watching a movie. Scott wondered how Styles' date with Lydia was going. Knock knock. The voice sent shivers down Scott's spine, mainly because he recognized it. The front door swung open, revealing a grinning Peter. "Scott, I didn't know you would have company," Peter said with a smirk. Sitting up, he looked at Peter, not knowing what to say. Right now he was alone. He understood that he wouldn't be able to take Peter. Derek and Elias maybe, but he didn't stand a chance. "Who is this?" Allison asked, looking at Scott. "This is..." Not knowing how to reply, he froze. "I'm Derek's uncle, Peter. Scott borrowed a couple of tools from Derek. I'm here to get them back," Peter spoke in a kind tone. "Yeah, they're outside. You should find them on the porch," Scott said, trying his best to get Peter to leave. "Why don't you show me? It's pretty dark out there, and I'd rather not be here for long." Narrowing his eyes at Scott, Peter made sure he took the hint. "My phone has a flashlight I can show you," Allison said, reaching for her phone. Panicking on the inside, Scott cursed Peter in his head. "It's all right, I'll show him." Flashing Allison a smile, Scott stood up, leading Peter outside. Closing the door behind him, Peter smiled at Scott. We can finally have a nice little chat, free of your annoying friends. What do you want? Scott understood that Allison was currently in danger. He regretted not going to the dance. Doing so would have been safer. It's pretty simple, actually. I want you to join me. Unlike Styles, who seems like a natural at this, you're different. Scott mentally sighed hearing this. He wasn't jealous of Styles. He had been interested in the supernatural before all of this happened. Scott just wanted a regular life. I just want to be normal. I'm tired of all of this. People trying to kill me, my girlfriend. You literally sent someone to break my neck. Why can't you just leave me alone? Ah, the dreams of youth? I once had a similar dream, Scott. Derek probably hasn't told you this, but before the hailfire, I lived a pretty peaceful life. My older sister was the alpha, and she made sure everyone in the family was happy. Oh, what I wouldn't give to go back to those days. When all the senseless killing didn't exist. When your own family didn't wish to kill you for your power. Peter leaned back against the balcony as he thought about the past. Then why don't you? Leave us all alone. Stop terrorizing Beacon Hills. Live a peaceful life. Scott spoke his mind, seeing a part of Peter he didn't think existed. He was a monster, and yet at that moment, he seemed human, who didn't wish they could go back in time and change something. Scott wished he could go back to the day Elias bit him every time he looked in the mirror and saw his eyes glow a golden hue. Because I can't. Peter stood up, his eyes flashing a bloody red. They took it from me. The Argents burned my family to the ground. I was there, Scott. Do you know what kind of pain I went through? Do you think you know pain? Try sitting in a hospital bed with the inability to move as your skin did its best to heal, but the scar tissue from having half of your body burned to cinders stopping it. I was trapped, with nothing but my own thoughts. You want to know what I thought about Scott? Scott frowned, taking a step back. He could see the anger. He was afraid not for himself, but for Allison. Finding every single person involved and tearing them to pieces. Only that would be a mercy, as they wouldn't be tortured as I was. That's what I've been doing. The murder that have happened in Beacon Hills. Each of them had a part in what happened to my family. You're here for Allison? Scott said, causing Peter to pause before he broke out in a fit of laughter. Even his eyes returned to normal as he laughed at Scott. No, Scott, at one point in time, maybe killing her would have been the plan. But she's innocent, just like my family was. If it wasn't for a certain Mikaelson, she certainly would have come into play, but I have a bigger target. Peter took a second before speaking again. Scott, like I said, I'm here for you. Join my pack. With me, you'll be a beta. With Elias, I'm sure you're forever doomed to be an omega. How did you know that? Scott asked with a frown on his face. Scott, I've been observing from the very beginning. You don't think you're cut out for this life. Maybe you believe making the lacrosse team and even dating Allison would have happened without your abilities. Scott froze as Peter somehow spoke his exact thoughts. Unfortunately for you, Scott, you're wrong. Without your werewolf abilities, you never would have made the team. And Allison? How many times did your werewolf abilities come into play then? Tell me you've never eavesdropped or shown off to get her attention. He was right. Scott had been under the impression that him being a werewolf had only brought on bad things. At the party, he had been unable to control himself due to the full moon. Because of that, he was forced to ditch Allison. That led him into the hunters, and he almost died. He had gotten into a fight with Styles because he couldn't control his anger. He was only seeing the bad, but Peter was right. Making the lacrosse team, even his first meeting with Allison, was a byproduct of his werewolf abilities. How else would he have known she needed a pen? You see, Scott, you aren't like Styles, but you aren't any worse. From the very beginning, you used your abilities to your advantage to get the girl, to make the team. They don't see how valuable you are, but I do. Peter smirked as he looked at Scott. Elias is a Mikaelson. He's looked at everyone around and only saw what they could provide. He's young, ignorant, and naive. How could he see the value you provide? Join me, Scott. At least I see what you can provide. Buzz Scott tried to ignore it, but he was sure Peter had also heard it. Looking up at him, he realized that he wanted him to answer it. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone. He frowned, seeing the name of the caller. It's Styles. Showing the phone to Peter, he got a nod in response. "Answer it." "Hello," Scott spoke into his phone. "Lydia's been attacked?" "By Peter." Looking up, he frowned, looking at Peter, who only shrugged in response. "Yeah, we're on the way." Hanging up the phone, Scott looked Peter in the eye. "Go, I won't stop you." Peter watched as Scott ran into the house, and as the door closed, he walked towards the mailbox hanging next to the front door. Pulling it up, he placed a piece of paper under it. He watched as the piece of paper glowed purple before it blended into the paint. Narrowing his eyes slightly, he soon grinned, knowing his plan was perfect. Derek got out of his Ford Mustang with a frown on his face. He wore his black jacket with a pair of dark jeans. He hadn't had the tiniest bit of interest in attending prom as a chaperone. He regretted that now. He should have gone at least to make sure everyone was safe. Entering the manor, he walked towards the front room. He immediately noticed Elias standing in the corner. He hadn't looked at Derek, but he was sure he knew he was there. Lydia laid out on the couch as Marin looked over her. Styles sat in a chair not too far away from the couch, biting his nails. The atmosphere was tense. "Peter bit Lydia." Elias's voice drew Derek back to him. "How?" Even if he wasn't at the school, Elias should have been able to keep everyone safe. He had his nurse set up a shield in the gym. "I wasn't able to hear anything beyond the gym doors." Derek could see the blame Elias was currently placing on himself. "It's not your fault," Derek said, hoping to console Elias. Sure, Elias may have been stronger than him, but he was still just a teenager. "I know, this is Peter's fault. That's why this will end tonight. I need your help, Derek. I need to know every place your uncle would use as a hideout. A place that would hide his scent." Derek took a second to think. It took a minute, but eventually, there was only one place he could think of. "Our family vault. It's the perfect place." Elias smiled hearing that answer. "Good, we'll leave as soon as Scott gets here." Looking over at Styles, he was half tempted to leave him behind. Right now he would surely rather be with Lydia. "Styles, we have a good idea of where Peter is hiding out. If you want, you can stay here and watch over Lydia." Elias kneeled down next to his friend. "No." Styles turned to look Elias in the eyes, and Elias noticed something he hadn't seen within them before. Hatred. "I want to watch him die. I understand that Derek has to be the one to kill him, but I want to be there." Elias nodded, and internally he was grateful. It wouldn't have been insane for Styles to want to kill Peter himself. But to go along with Elias' plan, he had put aside his hatred and settled for watching him die. "When Scott gets here, we're leaving," Elias said, getting a nod from Styles. Next was Marin. Tonight was supposed to be her night, but Peter had ruined that. Taking a knee next to her, he grabbed her hand. "I'm sorry that tonight hasn't gone as planned. I'm gonna take care of Peter once and for all." "Go, I'll stay here and watch over Lydia," Marin said, not even turning to look at Elias. "You won't be alone. Allison is on her way." Placing a kiss on her head, he turned and walked back over to Styles, who had now joined Derek. "Peter Hale dies tonight. What about Jackson?" Styles asked with disgust written all over his face. "I think it's time to release that video," Elias said, looking at Styles. "Is that enough? Don't you think he deserves worse?" "For Lydia, for Styles?" Derek asked. "Your uncle is an expert manipulator. Jackson didn't stand a chance. The worst we can do right now is ruin his reputation. He thinks becoming a werewolf will cement his position as the #1 jock in the school. What he wants more is attention, so we'll give it to him, only it'll be negative attention." As Elias spoke, even Styles seemed to nod. Elias would do what needed to be done if Lydia didn't survive the bite. 15 minutes later, Allison entered the room with panic on her face. "Where is she?" Pointing towards the couch, Elias watched as she walked over, taking a seat next to Marin. Scott entered with an equally panicked face, only it wasn't completely because of Lydia. "We have a problem. Peter Hale was at my house." "What did he say?" Elias asked while making sure to listen to Scott's heartbeat. They had just had a conversation about how manipulative Peter Hale could be. "He wanted me to join his pack. He was trying to use Allison against me. He thinks being an Omega here is a waste of my talent. He talked about your family." Scott took a look at Elias. He said the Mikaelsons are heartless, cunning beast. They only see the value in how well the people around them can be used. He said you'll never make me a beta. And what do you think, Scott? Elias asked, still leaning against the wall. I think you'll keep your word. It took me a while to realize it, but you've only been trying to help since you arrived. If being an Omega is the highest, I'll go, who cares? I won't be betraying my friends to a psycho-murdering alpha. Good, because we're taking care of Peter tonight, Elias smiled before patting Scott on the back. His heart was relaxed that whole time. Maybe there was a chance for Scott after all. I'm glad you're finally seeing things our way, Derek said, patting Scott on the back as well. Scott, you won't always be an Omega. Just show Elias that he can trust you, and I promise you'll be a beta in no time. You guys are going after Peter? Allison walked over, gripping her hands tightly. Allison, Scott made to speak but was interrupted. I know you're a werewolf, Scott. Allison looked at Styles and Derek before stopping on Elias. You all are. I know I can't help, but he hurt Lydia. We'll take care of it, Elias interrupted. He'll get his, Styles said as his eyes flashed a hint of yellow. Good, Allison said, nodding her head. Allison - Scott, will talk later. Stepping towards Scott, Allison placed a kiss on Scott's lips. I want you to know that nothing has changed. I still love you. You do? Scott asked with a smile appearing on his face. I do. Derek taped the wheel of his car as he drove down the road. Behind him was Styles' Jeep with a very serious-looking Styles in the front seat. Today was the day that they would finally rid Beacon Hills of its biggest problem. His uncle Peter Hale. For Derek, it was more than that. Not only would he be rid of his uncle, he would have the chance to avenge his sister. The Hale pack has been torn to pieces ever since the night of that fire, and just when his sister was about to revive it, she was stabbed in the back by her own blood. Thinking about it made Derek's eyes grow a fiery blue tonight. Pulling into the school parking lot, he got out of the car, walking to the trunk. He leaned against it, watching as Styles pulled in behind him. Getting out of the car, confusion appeared on Styles' face. Your family vault is in Beacon Hills? Derek only shook his head before another voice spoke. It's beneath it. Elias got out of Styles' Jeep, closing the door behind him. So he's literally been under our noses this entire time. Styles shook his head, wondering how they had missed this for so long. This is how they set up the spells and even got to Lydia without any of us noticing, Derek said, leading the way to the entrance of the vault. Once I open this, there's no turning back. We kill Peter tonight. Open it. Elias's eyes flashed red as he spoke. Derek nodded as his eyes glowed blue. His nails became claw-like. Inserting them into the keyhole, he watched as the mechanism sounded off. They waited as the door to the vault opened. Inside, Peter Hale sat in a wooden chair with a book in his hand and a pair of reading glasses on his face. Scott, Styles, block the door, we'll handle him. Elias's voice was like a whisper before he vanished from view. Next thing Derek knew, he was standing in front of Peter Hale with his hand wrapped around his neck. My, have none of you been taught proper manners? You enter my home without knocking, I mean, at least take off your shoes. Peter's laugh was cut short as Elias tightened his grip. Derek, come, let's finish this now before his nurse shows up. Derek hurried over, looking his uncle in the eyes, not seeing fear as he had expected. Oh, she won't be showing up tonight, she's predisposed. Taking care of business, Peter said in a tight voice. Sadly, it seems like I won't be seeing her again. It's unfortunate that you found me tonight. Derek frowned at his words. Something was off, but he couldn't tell what. This wasn't his uncle in this sort of situation. Surely he would have been doing anything he could to buy himself time. But he seems to have accepted his fate. Derek. Elias' voice shook him from his thoughts. Stepping forwards, his eyes flashed blue as he dug his claws into Peter's heart. I'll be back. This is only the beginning, Derek. Peter's voice was a whisper, but they all heard it clearly. Derek felt a sense of relief wash over himself as he saw the light leave Peter's eyes. Before he could dive into that feeling, another one overtook him. Happiness. He had avenged his sister, but this was only the beginning. With the help of Elias, he would revive the Hale pack back to its peak. Power. He could feel it seeping into his bones like the blood that dripped from his hands. Curiosity overtook him as he felt power wash over his entire being. A burning sensation appeared in his eyes, but he could tell this was only the beginning. In the next few weeks, his body would continue evolving until he finally became a full alpha. I'll bury him with the rest of the family. I'd like to believe he was doing all of this for them. The fire changed him into a monster with no sense of morality. He didn't even see his own family as a family anymore. My mother would be angry, but even she would bury him with the rest of the family. Derek looked down at his uncle with his now glowing red eyes. He was simply glad it was over. He took his uncle's last words as the last words of a dying, desperate psychopath. They weren't worth wasting his time thinking over. "We should get back to Lydia and the girls," Elias said, patting Derek on the shoulder. He wasn't sure he himself would have been able to do it. Killing his own uncle. Next morning, Niklaus stood over an unconscious Kate Argent. Standing next to him was a beautiful brunette-haired nurse. She waved her hand back and forth as she spoke in Latin. In her other hand was the root of a tree. Once she finished, she turned and looked at Niklaus, a frown on her face. "It's possible, but you'll need the bite. Unfortunately, it will have no effect on the part of you that's already been locked away. Although they seem to be the same thing, they're inherently different. Doing so would likely only add to your problems." Hearing her, Niklaus shook his head. "Well, thank you for your time, Nurse Jennifer. I'm sure everything went according to you and Peter's plans tonight." Niklaus smirked as he ran his hand through Kate's hair. "Of course they have. They think he's dead. When he returns, they'll realize how wrong they are," Jennifer said with a lovely smile on her face. "Well, it won't matter in the end. He doesn't stand a chance against my nephew. Him biding his time only gives the young Elias a chance to grow. He won't stand a chance. Well, you should be leaving, you know, going into hiding and whatnot. I have a word jaguar to get rid of." Once Jennifer was gone, Niklaus stopped the machines, keeping Kate sedated. Grabbing a syringe, he inserted it into her arm. 5, 4, 3, 2, and... Kate shot forward, taking a couple of breaths as she looked around before finally spotting Niklaus. "You're awake," he grinned as he looked at her. Stepping forward, he gripped her neck, staring into her eyes. "You will head back to Beacon Hills. You'll forget any of the horrible things I did to you while remembering us being friends. You now understand that your father is the bad guy. The things he's made you do have scarred you. You wish to make up for your mistakes. How you do so is up to you. Goodbye, Kate Argent." Letting his compulsion kick in, Niklaus bopped her on the forehead, watching as she fainted. 15 minutes later, Kate Argent woke up in the front seat of her car. Sitting up, she looked over, grabbing her phone. Powering it on, she frowned, seeing the amount of missed calls she had. Placing the phone to her ear, she started the car and began her ride back to Beacon Hills. Niklaus watched her pull off with a smirk on his face. He had hoped these new and interesting werewolves could help him unlock his other half, but that didn't seem to be the case. Fortunately, he had his fingers in plenty of cookie jars, and one had just paid off. The doppelganger has been found, and his plan could finally come to fruition. 2 days later, upstairs in Elias' room, both Styles and Elias could be seen with PlayStation 3 controllers in their hands. Max Ammo, a voice from the TV, somehow managed to make both Elias and Styles sigh in relief. Zombies chased after their characters in the small but dangerous map called Nacht der Untoten. Styles shot at the zombies as Elias boarded up the windows behind them. Unfortunately, they had made a big mistake. The door leading to the box was opened and zombies filtered through it with unstoppable numbers. Styles was the first to go down, and as Elias did his best to stay up, it just wasn't meant to be. A zombie spawned from the window, effectively cutting off his route and ending their longest round yet. "It's funny, we both have increased reaction speed, and yet we can't survive past round 10, Elias said with a sigh. "Yeah, my head just isn't in it," Styles said, placing the controller on the floor next to him. Same, Elias had only bought the PlayStation and the COD Black Ops because he wanted to take his mind off of Marin. Styles was here for the exact same reason. Lydia was still downstairs, unconscious. Elias had made a tough call. It was better for Lydia to remain here in case she woke up a werewolf. He had given her a bit of his blood, so that if she didn't make it, she would at least live, if you could call being a vampire living. Using compulsion of Mrs. Martin would have been the next stop if Allison hadn't called her and explained that Lydia was going to be staying at her house for the next few days. "Creak, did you hear that?" Elias asked Styles, who frowned in response. Is it your dad or uncle? Styles asked. No, my dad won't be back for a while, and if it was my uncle we would know. Standing up, Elias frowned. Lydia. Styles stood up, bumping into the side of the door hinge as he ran down the stairs. Elias followed, wondering if Lydia had finally woken up. The bed they had moved downstairs was empty. Lydia nowhere to be found. The front door? Wide open, with the wind blowing the screen into the side of the house. The sound of rain and thunder could be heard from where they stood. Elias looked at Styles, who seemed stuck between worried and happy. Did someone take her, or did she leave by herself? Styles turned around, looking at Elias. What do you smell? Elias said in return. Styles took a second, allowing his senses to overwhelm him before a smile appeared on her face. She's all right. Except the first thing she did after waking up was run, Elias said with a frown on his face. Lydia had left by herself. Why? Elias had no idea, but this meant she wasn't going to die, and judging by her scent, she wasn't leaving very fast. Unfortunately, with the rain tracking her just became a lot harder. Time to call in the cavalry. Pulling out his phone, Elias tapped Derek's name. While Elias did that, Styles called Scott. No answer from Derek. Elias already guessed that he wouldn't pick up. He had become an alpha, and while he was still on the beck and call of Elias, right now was a very sensitive time. From what Derek had told him, the next week or so would be nothing but pain. Derek's body would be constantly changing, becoming the best version of himself not only in body but in mind. If he failed in controlling himself, he would become a monster like Peter. Putting his phone in his pocket, he looked at Styles. He was currently explaining the situation to Scott. If Marin had still been in town, he could have called her and asked Deaton for help, but right now they were both out of town. Deaton would likely return in a couple of days, but if Elias wanted to see Marin, he would have to visit her. All right, Scott is going to call Allison and get her help. Elias nodded, looking outside at the rain. He wondered if going by foot was the best choice. I'll grab a couple of blankets. You start up the jeep. Lydia was likely in the surrounding forest. It would be better to park the car along the road, so once they did find her, they could immediately get out of the rain. Running towards the back of the manor, Elias opened a closet, pulling out a couple of blankets. Reaching higher up, he grabbed a duffel bag. Throwing the blankets inside, he jogged back towards the front door. The lights from the jeep flashed as Styles could already be seen in the front seat. Closing the door behind him, Elias Vamp sped through the rain, immediately appearing inside the passenger seat of the jeep. Drive. Styles didn't need to be told twice, immediately reversing the car before putting it in drive and pulling off towards the forest. They drove for a while. Elias used his super hearing, hoping to hear Lydia walking through the forest. If she was a werewolf right now, she might be running, which would only make it harder. The rain didn't help. In fact, it was messing with Elias' senses. Smelling Lydia was impossible, and her tracks were being erased as she made them. Ignoring the sound of the rain was even more of a problem. Styles raised his hands up before slamming them on the wheel. Elias could feel the anger wafting off of him. We'll find her, he said, trying to console his friend. How? We've been searching for an hour already and have no idea where she is. Elias didn't know how to respond. The forest was just too large and stretched in every direction, making it hard to pick which way to focus on. Lydia walked through the forest drowsy, with no idea where she currently was. The feeling of the rain hitting her skin was non-existent. Her wet hair covered the front of her face as the heavy soaked clothes slowed her down. Crack! The sound of a branch breaking drew her attention. As she looked in the direction of the branch, her eyes went wide. A scream so horrifyingly loud was released from her mouth, as whatever it was that had broken the branch seemed to vanish. Styles pulled the jeep to the side of the road. As his eyes went wide at the sound of the scream, he was sure every supernatural in Beacon Hills had heard. Lydia! The sound had come from behind them. Turning the jeep around, he sped in her direction. Elias frowned. Lydia's voice was filled with power. Power that reminded him of magic. He had a feeling she wasn't a werewolf. Pulling the car over, Styles hopped out of his jeep with Elias following. It came from this direction. Styles picked up his speed, running past the trees. From his right eye, in his peripheral vision, he saw a shadow. Stopping in his tracks, a smile appeared on his face. Lydia! He yelled out, causing her to stop in her tracks. Styles! She asked as a smile appeared on her face. Running over to her, Styles pulled her into a hug, ignoring the wetness of her clothes. If they stayed in the rain any longer, his clothes would surely be just as wet. Silence filled the forest as Lydia and Styles hugged it out. It was safe to say it was over. Peter was dead, and even Lydia, who he had bitten, had survived. Jackson was another problem, but one Elias was sure they could easily solve. It was over. Beacon Hills could now return to a peaceful town without psycho-murdering werewolves to cause havoc. Clearing his throat, Elias waved at both Lydia and Styles. "I understand the emotions and all, but it's still raining." Styles smiled, hearing his friend, before looking back down at Lydia. "Let's get you out of the rain." Lydia nodded as Styles wrapped his arm around her shoulder, almost sheltering her from the rain. That night, they celebrated. Lydia was okay, Peter was gone, and they had a break from school. Everyone showed but Derek, which they all understood. They were high schoolers anyway, so they didn't expect Derek to be at every gathering. Scott and Allison were the first to leave. After them, it was Styles driving Lydia home, leaving Elias alone in the Mikaelson manor. Laying down in his bed, Elias closed his eyes, drifting off to La La Land. "Elias," a whisper forced him to open his eyes, only he wasn't in his bed anymore. He was back in Mystic Fall. Dark clouds filled the sky. The soft rumbling of thunder could be heard now and then. "Elias," there it was again. The whisper. Looking up, Elias realized he was now standing in front of his home. The brown brick house that brought back so many memories seemed less warm. Something had changed. Running across the lawn, he jogged up the steps, quickly reaching for the door handle. Twisting it open, smoke rolled out of the house as he realized there was a fire happening inside. "Elias." The whisper was coming from inside the house. Stepping inside, he was the old family pictures being burned to ashes. A red blazing fire was coming from the back room where his grandmother usually did her spells. Walking over to the doorway, he paused as he heard the whisper again. "Elias." This time he was sure it was coming from this room. Taking a step forward, he frowned as he felt his body freeze. He couldn't go in. Something was stopping him. "Elias, she needs your help." This time the voice said more. Who needs my help?" Elias asked, looking around the house. "They're already here." Before he could ask who, he was pulled out of the house by an invisible force. "Elias." Opening his eyes, Elias spotted Styles standing over him, shaking his shoulder. "What happened?" he asked, wondering why Styles was waking him up. "You were screaming," Styles said with a frown on his face. "I forgot my phone, so I came to grab it, and when I got here I heard you screaming." "What did I say?" Elias asked. "You were asking who needed your help," Styles said, raising an eyebrow. As if struck by lightning, Elias remembered his dream. Only now he didn't think it was his dream, no. It felt like a message. His Grams. She needed his help. Why else would it be her house, her spell room? Strengthening his resolve, he made a decision. He was going home. That night Elias barely got any sleep. He was worried that something had gone wrong back home. Eventually, he got tired of tossing and turning, and instead opted to get up and go for a run. By the time he got back home, the sun had already risen. Styles stood outside the manor, leaning against his jeep as he looked down at his phone. He seemed to hear Elias as he looked up at him the moment Elias was going to speak. "How's Lydia? Any signs that she's a werewolf?" He didn't think she was, especially not after that scream she had let out last night, but he wanted to be sure. "Nope. She's a regular teenage girl. Allison is with her right now. After what Peter did, I don't think she's going to be alone by herself for a while." Styles spoke with a bit of anger in his voice, causing Elias to nod. "When I get out of the shower, we're going to find Derek." Elias didn't wait for his reply, quickly running inside to get a shower. When he returned, Styles was still in his jeep with the engine started. Werewolf hearing tended to make things smoother. Getting in the jeep, he looked forward, waiting on Styles to pull off. "Dude, I can't drive if I don't know where I'm going," Styles said with mock annoyance. "Just drive. I'll give directions as we're going." The next 15 minutes were a montage of Styles having no idea where he was going while Elias gave directions. "Take a right here. Stop the car." As Styles came to a stop, he turned to Elias with a frown on his face. They stopped in front of a couple of high-end apartment buildings. "Derek's here?" You mean the guy who lived inside a burnt-down house is here? Styles couldn't believe it. How'd you know he was here anyway? He asked. Pack bond, he said jokingly. Wait, you mean, we're able to talk to each other telepathically? That's awesome. Have you and Derek been talking this whole time? Is it because he's an alpha? Elias paused, hearing so many questions. Reaching for his phone, he aimed the screen towards Styles. GPS. Seeing Styles' look of utter disappointment, Elias couldn't hold back his laughter. Pack bond? Talking telepathically? Only someone like Styles would believe it was possible. Elias stepped out of the vehicle, placing his phone in his pocket. Looking up at the high-end apartments, he spotted a pair of dark eyes veering at him from one of the highest windows. It was Derek. He looked down for a couple of seconds before vanishing. It's this way, he led the way. Taking the stairs, they soon ended up in front of a pair of double doors. Should we knock? Styles asked from the side. No need, Elias replied as the double doors were pulled open. Derek stood in front of them, breathing heavily, his eyes constantly flashing a devious red. You guys shouldn't be here, he said as his teeth elongated. He gripped his abdomen tightly as his nails on his other hand tore into the door. Yeah, maybe you're right, Styles said, turning to walk back towards the stairs, only for Elias' hand to reach over, placing a hand on his shoulder. Giving him a nod, Styles took a step back, now standing behind Elias. Derek, I'm going to need you to calm down, Elias said softly. I can't, I'm losing control. As he spoke, his eyes stopped blinking red, finally settling on the color of blood. Unfortunately, that means I'll have to calm you down. Allowing his eyes to flash a hint of red, Elias watched as Derek's began to fade before he was finally once again in control of himself. Thank you, Elias. Taking a step back, Derek actually smiled as he welcomed Styles and Elias. No problem, I like the upgrade, Elias said, stepping inside and taking a look around the place. He had everything from couches to tables and lamps. Everything inside was a very dull color, matching the almost concrete gray walls. Off to the side was a brick wall, only a hole that could fit a car inside was there. Yes, sure beats the burnt-down house and the railroad tracks, Styles said, quickly taking a step back as Derek sent a glare his way. So, besides a friendly visit, is there any other reason you both decided to come here today? Derek asked, walking over to his fridge, grabbing a water bottle. I'm leaving Beacon Hills, Elias said, surprising both Derek and Styles. You're coming back, right? Styles asked with worry. I'm going to visit family. I haven't seen my Grams and sister in a long time. Elias smiled, thinking about them both. I'll go with you, Derek said, taking a sip of his water. You're still adapting to your new status right now. You should stay here and let your body rest. If when it's done I'm still there, feel free to join me. I'm going too, Styles said with a nod. Nope. You remember the nightmare I had yesterday, Styles? Elias asked, getting an ominous nod from Styles and a curious stare from Derek. I have a feeling this visit won't be peaceful. After Peter, you and Scott need to relax here in Beacon Hills. Enjoy the break. I'll be back before school starts. But Styles made to speak, but Elias cut him off. Styles, Lydia needs you right now more than ever. Spend the break with her. Elias nodded with a smile as Styles himself nodded. Derek, you'll be in charge while I'm gone. If anything happens, listen to him. Elias turned to Styles. Wait, does that mean when he leaves I'll be in charge? Styles asked. Yeah, Elias nodded as Styles himself seemed to daydream about what it would be like to be the alpha in charge, although he wasn't an alpha.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.